you, Pratham.
Thank you, Pratham. Thank you, Pratham.
Thank you, Pratham.
Thank you, Pratham.
We have more people coming in as the session continues. My name is Devyani, and I'll be talking to you a little bit throughout the afternoon today. I've been with Pratham for 7 years, and it's been quite a journey so far. But I can definitely say that 7 years is very, very little compared to the people who are in the room today. So thank you so much to the Pratham family and well-wishers for being with us today. In a run-up to our birthday, in typical Pratham style, we decided to do something a little bit fun. For those of you who have been associated with Pratham for many years, you'd know that we like to do ambitious things. And one of those ambitious things this time was to see how many birthday wishes we can get from across the country. So Madhav, for those of you who know him, he likes to launch such interesting ideas. He launched the Pratham Wish Portal. And for those of you who have not left us a wish, please do so after the event today. It's wish.pratham.org. And when we started out, in the early days, we were seeing a few hundred wishes and a few thousand wishes, and we were just testing it out amongst our community and our teams. And then we decided to open it out to, well, all of India, and then to the rest of the world. And yesterday, we reached, well, day before yesterday, we reached a landmark which was about 1 million wishes on that Pratham portal. So it's really amazing for us to see the kind of support that we have from all over the country. I don't know if we're able to show it to you right now, but we, as of a few hours ago, we had reached 1.8 million wishes. Yes, there we are, 1.85 million wishes. So thank you so much to everybody who's left a wish for us. We've asked you to leave a little photograph and a little message, and we hope to be able to cherish these memories for time to come. So thank you so much. To begin our session today, I wanted to share some wishes, supporters, some key philanthropists and thinkers in education. They were not able to be with us today, but they sent their wishes through for us to share with all of you. So if we are able to play the video, thank you so much.
First of all, let me thank you for taking the trouble of coming all the way down to Bangalore to have this chat, number one. I apologize for not being with you on the important day because of certain commitments. And I also want to congratulate you for the consistent and sustainable input that you have been feeding to the people, the public, who are most interested. Because if there is one topic in this country in which anybody and everybody will have like to talk or to know or to even anticipate things, it is education.
I'm really delighted that I've been asked to speak today on the occasion of Pratham's 25th anniversary. Pratham has truly been a spectacular institution that has pioneered the focus on education in India, and I think what Pratham has done and what Pratham offshoots like ASR have done have really brought the focus of the world on India and the educational challenges that we face. Milestone from when we can look at the future, but I think the credit should go to all of you at Pratham for bringing this issue to the global sort of attention and getting so many people involved in addressing this massive challenge.
First of all, congratulations to Pratham, because you've been at it for 25 years, trying to make sure every child is in school and learning well. So I feel very proud to be part of that journey. I really do. Because that's how I began my more serious work in the social sector. Because in December 1999, exactly how many, 20 years ago, Madhukar came to my home carrying a briefcase like a traveling salesman, saying, do you want to join, because in this briefcase I have all this magic things which I'm selling to you, and you're going to put every child in Bangalore in school. So I said, sounds good, because it was the perfect time for me. The children were growing up. And that's how I came in the Pratham network, and it's taught me a lot, so I'm very grateful to that. I think from the Pratham journey, certainly a very crucial thing that Pratham has done is to put this question front and center on the table. Nobody can miss this question about children learning anymore.
A very big congratulations on completing 25 years. And I have to share a few thoughts as you reach this milestone. First is about your history. You must understand that you started this vision of helping India educate itself when people didn't even understand that there was a problem. And to be able to work in an area where people did not believe there was a problem is a very difficult exercise. Putting education on the map of the largest few problems India needs to solve is a credit to all of you who have and are working in Pratham. The second example, when I look around, and I shared this with Rukmini that I'm a big fan of Pratham, is that the innovation you have brought onto the table, whether it is in form of the ASA reports, whether it is hiring a very large number of people who have not done social sector or education before, inspiring them to do stuff they have not done before, is a human service to the country and is an example for many others to follow. And the third is, for the first time, you guys, and I can imagine, partnered with the state governments, understood the importance of state governments over the central government, partnered with state governments for you to be able to get the mandate to work in school, out of school, experiment number 1, experiment number 2. It is crazy. It is crazy the kind of work you have been able to do in the last 25 years. This country needs you. This country needs hundreds of you. And I wish you the very best.
I'm going to move to the next session in our program today. But before that, I'd like to take a minute to share with you that we have some moments from Pratham's history, many of which were mentioned here as well, displayed in the foyer outside. So please do take a moment to look after the program. It's my privilege now to invite Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, CEO of Pratham Education Foundation, on stage.
Good evening, everyone. It's my huge pleasure to introduce, of course, slow introduction. All the details of his life are now known to everybody in India. So I thought what I can do is just maybe say a little bit about how he's connected to us. Abhijit, I feel like the only time I've actually met you in Bombay was in 1999. And I think after that, it's many, many years later that we are meeting again here. And perhaps that's just appropriate because in those years, we've done many things together. So we've worked with Abhijit, Esther, and their team, Chepal, I was trying to count, first we started in the municipal schools of Bombay and Baroda, and then in UP, in Bihar, in Uttarakhand, in Haryana, so we've been all over the place. But it needed Pratham's 25th birthday and a Nobel Prize to bring us all back to Bombay. We've learned a lot from Abhijit over the years, Abhijit and Esther and their team. There are some things we do very naturally, without much planning. And you'll see that Abhijit is also wearing Pratham yellow, just naturally. I don't want to take time away from him, but I wanted to just quote a few of my colleagues who've also worked with him for many years. One of my colleagues from Bihar, who's called Sanjay, said that इतने theory के आदमी हैं, but इनसे हमने सीखा है कि हर program के implementation में हर detail की ज़रूरत है. And I think that that's something very important in all the work that we've done together. Every last detail of what we do has been discussed and planned and designed so that eventually if we find that something works, it's a result of all of this. Another colleague, Nuzat, who's probably here in the audience, said to me, there she is, yes. On the day that the Nobel Prize was announced, she said कि हम बच्चों के ज़रूरत के हिसाब से बहुत कुछ करते हैं. And we know that it's important because the kids need it. But हमें कोई एहसास नहीं था कि दुनिया के लिए ये ज़रूरी काम है. जिस दिन Nobel Prize मिला, I think they realized, and she said that I am so lucky, as we all are, to be part of this journey. So without any further ado, I will hand over the mic. This mic is working to you. I don't know if yours is. And leave it to you to take us forward.
So thank you, Rukmini, and thank you for this opportunity to be with all of you, Pratham supporters, on this wonderful occasion. It's really a privilege, truly a privilege, to have been associated with an organization as remarkable as Pratham for more than 20 years now. And I partly I'm going to use this occasion to express my gratitude. But I was invited to speak about some, bigger theme about, the use of evidence in development. So what I'll try to do is tell you a little bit of a story of my own learning and using examples from Pratham and maybe making a sort of giving you a general sense of why we talk so much about evidence and its importance in thinking about development problems in general and education in particular. But let me say, so in a sense, I'm of course much older than Pratham, but I feel like in some ways we are kind of the same age. I started doing RCTs in 1995. That sort of randomized control trials, which is what we got the Nobel Prize for. Or the first one we did, I'll talk about it a bit, it was in 1995. So I guess Pratham started in 1995, we're kind of brothers. So happy birthday, brother. Let's go back to the beginning. So why, and I'll just tell you about our first RCT. So why do we need evidence? Don't we know the answer? I mean, isn't education important? Of course education is important, but the problem is often that once you said that, what are you saying? What's education? What's the content of the statement education is important? And I think it's easy to sort of wax eloquent about the importance of education in people's lives, but it's not that you make education in people's lives. You make choices about, different things, how many teachers, how many students, how many classrooms, what kind of textbooks, what kind of teaching. That's education. And each of those decisions, unfortunately, are much more mundane, much more nitty-gritty, and much less understood than the general philosophical claim that education is important. And I think that's where evidence comes in. It's that it's the fact that we may think education is important, but we don't actually know how to make it happen sometimes. And I learned that the hard way in the first RCT we did. The first RCT we did was in Udaipur with another wonderful organization called Seva Mandir. And in that RCT, we were completely pursuing the obvious. We are going to double the number of teachers per school, and that's going to obviously make all the students learn better. That was our presumption, and then we, collected lots of data, and we squinted at the data, and data seemed to say there was no difference between the schools that got an extra teacher and the schools that didn't. So double the number of teachers and the schools that didn't. And we squinted at it more, and we said, okay, we must be collecting the wrong data. So we kept collecting data, so much that that paper never got published. We kept collecting data in the pursuit of that elusive answer, but the elusive answer never came back. We never found any difference between those schools. The extra teacher didn't do anything. And so that's one very important reason why we needed evidence. Our intuition, even when it's like from very sophisticated people, even maybe sometimes even people in Pratham, not just innocents like me, is often porous. That's first reason why we need evidence. And in some sense, I guess maybe that's the main reason why we need evidence, is that it's difficult. Now, one reason why it's difficult is worth understanding, because it's, when you look at the world, you see schools that have lots of computers and, very well-trained teachers. Of course, they have better results. And you take that fact and you have to decide what to make of that. It's of course true, but it's also true that the parents of the children who went to those schools are more likely to work in finance. So is it the schools, or is it the parents in finance that generate those outcomes? So that makes it very hard to know, and it's very hard to know. And so you can, if you look at this around the schools and you want to make up your own story, it's easy to make up any story you like. And that's sort of one of the challenges of evidence, is that, it's just very tempting. A second and related problem is that when you think of a good school has many, many good things. And what you think of as a not so good school probably doesn't have any of them. So which of those pieces? And that sort of, that unraveling of the, the little pieces that really make the difference, that's part of what makes the business of finding education critical. Is that it's not a matter of, yes, of course, good schools have many good things and bad schools don't have them, but which of them matter? And which one, if you had a little bit, small amount of money, which one should we spend it on? And that's sort of the kind of question which makes the kind of business of figuring out what's really important hard. A third problem, and this one I'm going to give an example from outside education, because it's the one that was most telling in my life, is measurement is hard. Knowing what you are actually observing is not actually, sort of what you actually observe is often not exactly what you're looking for. And when you try to measure, you often make mistakes. I'll tell you the mistake I made. So there was a program, again with this NGO, Seva Mandir, where they were putting walls around pieces of bare land. And when you look at what happens to the wall land, they showed me, look, this is a miracle. There's lots of grass, 3 feet of grass in the ones that were walled, and the ones we didn't have any walls, there was almost no grass, just stubble. And so I went back and I said, my God, I've seen a miracle today. Then, of course, I met somebody who's an expert, and he started kind of unpacking it for me. He said, yes, of course they have 3 feet of grass, because nobody is getting to eat that grass. But think of all the grass that's inside the cow's tummy. The cow has been eating that grass from the open land every day. So you have to go and count the amount of grass that the cows have eaten in the meanwhile. And at that point I realized this was not for me. I moved back to education. But that was an education. Measurement is hard. It's easy to see miracles. It's easy to see great achievements where maybe nothing's happening, and miss the great achievements as well. In both directions, it's hard. It's hard to know what's really important, what you are looking for, what you should be looking for. So once you grant me this premise that education is hard, evidence is important, and education is also hard, but education evidence is important. Then there's a question of how do you get good evidence? What constitutes good evidence? How do you know it? And that's the place where, again, I think there's a lot of lots of debates, and people like me say that you should do randomized control trials, and other people say no. But I think the first order fact, before we come to all of the kind of the big words of measurement and getting good evidence, is I think it's very important to be open-minded about what you're looking for. I think there's this whole, for example, I'll give you an example from education. If you talk to people, they will about why I have done this many times. Or one of the, you look at the ASA results. ASA results are uniformly, when they come out, everybody has a moment of depression. And I had somebody, absolutely, I won't name who he is, but who should have been responsible for fixing this. And I was talking to him about what the problem was. And he told me quite blandly, look, these kids, they grow up in families that have not enough food, not enough care. So by the time they get to school, they're handicapped. And so that's a very powerful and slightly depressive theory, because it says that India as a nation is maybe doomed for a long time, because everybody grows up in these families where they don't get enough nutrition, and I wonder, where did you get that theory from? How do you know that these kids can't learn? Have you gone and actually measured if they can learn as much? And the answer is actually that of course he hadn't, but it's actually hard to do. But in fact, my wife and co-author Esther did this in a study with Pratham in Delhi. What they did was they actually got children who are under 4 to play some symbolic math games. So they don't know any math, but kids do know which quantity is bigger. They can say this shape is different from that shape. So there are ways to measure that. This was work with Liz Spelker, who's a psychology professor at Harvard, and between them they had come up with a way to measure how kids in these schools perform on these non-symbolic math tests, which are basically math tests for people who don't know math. And it turns out that when you do that, the kids in Delhi slums do exactly as well as the kids in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is where Harvard and MIT are, and all the children there are, of course, the children of the PhD students and the professors, and they do exactly as well. So our kids at age 4 are just as good as anybody else. I think that's a fact that, so I think there is, I think it's very easy to build theories about things that we can't easily observe. And my friend, this very powerful guy, had convinced himself that there's no point pursuing the people who are really not performing well, because they're really handicapped. And that's both, I think, dangerous and false, as it turned out. The second thing, again, before I come to sort of methodological issues, is just keep your ears open. And I learned, I had one very telling example, which I will connect to other things I'll say, so I'll mention that example first. We were doing a study in this markets or fruit markets of Delhi, or the vegetable and fruit markets of Delhi. And the study was to see if these kids who sell in these markets, if they can do mental math. And the first order thing was we said mystery shoppers. You all noticed that these kids, if you give them, say, 300 grams of carrots and 400 grams of peas, they can just perfectly calculate the amount and tell you what it is, and you give them 200 rupees, they give you the change back instantly. They do the mental math in a second. And you see many of these kids, and we've done this now in the markets of Kolkata and Delhi, and we find that all of them get it basically right 95% of the time. 95% of the time, you ask them the question, they instantly give you the right answer. So these kids were very good at math. So once we do that, we say, okay, we go to their guardian and say, look, we would like to give your child a simple math test. What math test? Of course, the Asar math test. We give them the Asar math test. And in the Asar math test, you give them written math, not mental math. You give them written math, and then it was something like, 67 divided by 7. And the kid looked at me, and I was asking him, and he said, look, if I could do that, I would be in school. This is a kid who can do any amount of mental math instantly. And so it was kind of mind-boggling that he thought that, but in a sense, when you hear it, I think we don't hear enough of what people actually say. When you hear it, you realize what the problem is. The problem is that the school system, by prioritizing a particular algorithm for doing the math, is breaking the confidence of the kids who are there. They know he knows how to do math. He just doesn't want to do it, or doesn't believe he understands the particular algorithm, and he's been told that truth is that algorithm, that way of doing math. The one, you draw a line over it and you put 67 and you put 7 times something on one side, that's the way to do it. He just didn't know how to do it. So he immediately decided, this is not for me. It was very telling. So again, listening to people, keeping your eyes open, asking questions, don't believe when you can't see the evidence, don't believe that you know the truth. I think those are good starting points. And then I think it's very useful to do randomized controlled trials. The advantage of randomized controlled trials is that we go back to the question I asked right at the beginning, which is, how do I know that the school, it's which characteristic of the school that is matters. So when I look at the school of, the cathedral school in Bombay with one of the Bombay municipal corporation schools, when I do that comparison, there's 1,000 things that are different. And I don't know which one is critical. So how do I learn? How do I figure out what is critical? And I think part of the advantage of an RCT is that in principle, many of those things I could assign randomly to these schools, rather than saying that some schools are just different. I could decide within the class of municipal schools. Some schools could have more teachers, some schools could get more textbooks, other schools could get more different teaching methods, and we could see what happens. In other words, by starting with a sample of identical schools, randomly choosing some to get one thing and the others to not, we can create simple comparisons, easy to understand comparisons, which will tell us whether the particular intervention we're describing is useful or not. So in that sense, I think it's a simple device for knowing what the impact of a particular intervention is, and that's a very good and important reason why we in our organization, in our work with Pratham, we have emphasized randomized controlled trials. The last so now that we sort of agree that we're going to do, or maybe you don't agree with me, but let's say we say that we're going to do randomized controlled trials. The question is which one, and how there's still 1,000 hypotheses. Which one to test? And I think the first order and most important thing is rely on the wisdom of the organization that's asking the question. So if Pratham wants to know something, it's because they have a use for that answer. And that's a very important reason to prioritize what they're asking. So I remember when we first met Pratham, they wanted to know whether this Balsaki intervention worked. The Balsaki intervention is an intervention where a school gets a young woman, about 16 or something, whose job is to pull out children from the class, and the children who are lagging behind, and give them some extra coaching during school hours so they can catch up with the syllabus. And I guess when we talk to them, I remember they're saying, look, I think I think what we're doing here is critically important. They were doing many things at that time. They were doing programs for out-of-school children. They were doing all kinds of things, but they picked that one. And I think when I look back on that moment, I realize how critical that choice was, because we could have tested other things and maybe we would have learned something from that. But from this particular intervention, we started a path that has led to, I think, one of the great successes globally in changing education. I think Pratham came up with the idea of what they call we call teaching at the right level. And the genesis of that idea came from the Balsaki Institution. I'll say a little bit more about that idea later, but I think they chose that one. That was critical. Having the wisdom their wisdom in that story, to hear that, this is what you should test, was really critical. And I think that time and again, they have prioritized things for us. I remember when at some point Pratham was thinking about, how do we take these teaching tools that we have, these ways of making kids who are falling behind catch up, how do we make that go to scale? And one idea they had is maybe if we give the people in villages those tools, they would, and we teach them how to measure, children's outcomes. So some early version of pre-Asar, like an Asar test, but before Asar. If we teach them how to do it, they'll measure their own children. They'll learn that their own children are learning, and then they're going to themselves be able to intervene. So that was another hypothesis they had. This hypothesis, it turned out, didn't work. So Pratham, we did a RCD with Pratham, it didn't work, but that was extremely instructive to both Pratham and us. And I think that was one of Pratham's greatness is. It's like when you give them the message that, look, this intervention didn't work, they don't ask the question, how can you say that? We did it, it must work. They say, okay, let's think about what could that be telling us? Where is this? How could this rather obvious piece not work? And so we went to, rather than going down the rabbit hole of, fighting over the results, we went into a mode of trying to break that, to change that result, to see what would it take to break that result. And that process continued over time. We were, the next thing we did as a result of that was we said, look, we found two things in that study. One is teachers. We could train the teachers in these methods, but as long as the teachers were in the system, that didn't do much. And second, if you just get the parents involved and you show them that their children can't do basic math, they get upset. They beat the children just fine, but they don't actually manage to teach them either. So what was stopping? So it made us realize that you have to think beyond this point of saying that, there is a technology and we can use it. We have to think of what makes people not understand the technology, not use a technology that's kind of demonstrably good. And I think that was that particular process that we went through, or I went through with Pratham, was incredibly important for my own education, because it made me realize that this process of learning from evidence is not just I get one piece of evidence and that's, that tells me the answer to this, and there's some other piece of evidence that tells me an answer to something else, and I'm kind of done. In fact, each piece of evidence feeds back on all the others. And what you really learn from is the narrative that sits on top of those. That narrative is what you really learn from, is what is it that, how can all these facts hang together? So in some ways, that was I think the insight we got from this process. We would keep coming back to the results, sit down with, Esther and Rukmini and Madhav and others, Farida, many others, and just go through and kind of puzzle about the results. And that puzzling process is, I think, absolutely critical. The way evidence plays out is not because evidence answers questions. It's because it makes you ask smarter questions. It makes you develop the next set of questions. So I think one thing we understood from this is that somehow the constraint was nobody actually believed in the primary narrative that Pratham was offering, which was that nobody in the system, the teachers, nor even the parents, that every child can learn, and that what you have to do is just, teach them what they need to know. The counter belief that everybody held was that there is something true and important about the syllabus at this point. If the kid can't read, but he better learn history now. And that counter narrative was surprisingly incredibly powerful. So in some sense, I think that what that told us is two things. One is, it told us what experiment to run next. And we got lucky. In Bihar, we got a chance to involve school teachers, the ones who can't implement or don't implement the Pratham technologies when in normal school years. We got them to be in a summer school, when the advantage is that they had no obligations with the syllabus. They were hired to teach kind of the Pratham curriculum during the summer, and we find huge gains when they do that. So the same teachers who don't seem to teach it during the school year can teach it. So that was very revealing, because it told us that the problem isn't in ability to teach. It was not in the problem of the children's ability to learn. It was in the attitude of the system towards its own curriculum. The curriculum, when it's there, it trumps. So you have to somehow get around that. And it pushed us to do the next thing, which is to work with the government school system, but not just at the teacher level, but all the way from the top, work down till you get everybody to buy in, or at least many people to buy into the idea that somehow it's important to override the exigencies of the curriculum, that you have to look beyond the curriculum sometimes and just do what it takes to teach children. That's the goal is not to serve the curriculum, goal is to teach children. And I think once we understood that, we did a randomized control trial with the Haryana government, and once we understood that, we could see that actually the school teachers implementing a very similar program to sort of based on Pratham's methodology actually does work. And that particular process that took us, I think by the time we had that result from that, this was, we had worked with Pratham for 17 years, but at the end of 17 years, I think at least I was in a place where my understanding of what makes education hard and interesting and challenging and possible to change was entirely transformed. In the end, I understood exactly where one of these big levers lie, which I would have never imagined when I started. So I'm infinitely grateful to Pratham, both for what he's done to the world, of course, but also for what's done to me. I'm just a very different person. Last thought is that, when I met Pratham, I was, when Pratham's 25. At 25, I had not met Pratham. So I hope Pratham, then the next 25 years will be even more exciting. Pratham will meet its own Pratham and will grow from that. And the world will be even more transformed. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Abhijit. Thank you for being with us today. And we're very delighted to have you with us. I'm going to invite Farida Lambe, co-founder of Pratham, on stage to thank Abhijit. We would not agree with you much more than what you've already said. And I think we've always said that Abhijit is our family. And it's not because you've got the Nobel Laureate, but you've always been a part of our family.
Absolutely.
And when you got, and it was announced that you had the Nobel, we almost thought we had. So there were many more congratulation messages to Madhav and Rukmini and all of us that I think you must have probably got.
Yes, I got photos of cakes.
That's being very presumptuous, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for Pratham, to Pratham.
I think he needs a standing
Pratham,
ovation.
For you.
If there is space.
Thank you, Thank you, Pratham. Thank you, Farida. Thank you, Madhav. Thank you, Rukmini. Thank you, everyone.
Would have loved to have question answers, but he has very little time, so we are sorry on that. But I'm sure you will catch him somewhere. Thank you, Abhijit. Okay, Devani has given me exactly 3 to 4 minutes to say what I want to say. And it's going to be difficult because it's 25th year. I feel it was just a while back that Madhav and I met. And coincidentally, I just want to say some, disclaimers before I go on. When I say I mean we, so that Madhav has no scope to disagree. Madhav is always with this I. So I hope he's somewhere in the audience. Also, when I met him last, first time, he was in a blue shirt. 25 years, nothing has changed. He's once again in a blue shirt. I don't know whether it's a matter of coincidence or he did it by purpose. But that was not a part of my script, I promise. Having said that, we spent some time in establishing where we were born and when we were born. And in these days, it's very important to understand where you were born and when you were born. And if you don't have the papers, there's much problem. So in all these arguments, whether we were born in 94, 95, we decided to rely on a piece of paper, which is our registration certificate. So we got our registration certificate today. So today is our birthday. We've established that. So happy birthday to us and to all of you. This journey started, of course, with Unicef, and I'm happy that Richard Bridle, I think we are going to hear from him on the Zoom with this technology. The beautiful part of this journey is that we have continued interacting with the same individuals, organizations over the last 25 years. Agendas have changed, and I'm very happy today UNICEF project director is here, Rajeshwari, Alpa, who continue to give us this support, and of course UNICEF India. This would not have been possible without the municipal corporation, where Mr. Ranganathan, who was a former chief secretary, then the municipal commissioner, after Sharad Kale, of course, and we have Bahu Gawande as the education officer, who gave us actually the scope of working with the municipal corporation. The precursor to this entire municipal the Pratham was, I happened to be in the College of Social Work, and College of Social Work did along with Madhav and all, we did a study called Basic Education in Mumbai. And after that, when Pratham started, I think College of Social Work, Dr. Hazel Dilima, unfortunately is not here, but Lidwin, Gracie, Helen Joseph, and I see all my colleagues of Nirmala Niketan here, and many of my students here, so I almost think that I'm talking to the College of Social Work students. So thank you for being here and being a part of this journey. We have, of course, our Pratham Mumbai Education Initiative Board, and we have the Pratham Education Foundation Board. All of us are here, and thank you for all the support that you all have given us over the years. We have within this gathering government officials, Home Department, Department of Education. Can't name every one of them, but I'm extremely happy that they're there. We have the youngest person now in the municipal corporation who's helping us. He'll be very embarrassed, but I must say that Mr. Ashutosh Salil, who's here as the Joint Commissioner, who's helping us with the partnership in Mumbai. I should not forget that the UNICEF, when we started off, it was Vijay Chauhan who came to us and said, why don't you start something? And I'm happy Vijay Chauhan is here. The NGOs, we've had a huge network, starting from Koro, I don't know, I can't see Sujata Kandekar. I can see Medha Kulkarni from All India Radio, who's here. And there are many, many NGOs whom I can't name them, but without them, nothing would have really happened. So thank you, one and all, for doing what you have done. I want to say that we are in India working in all the states. We've not called everybody here because it has been difficult. Over the year, we'll have the program, but what is more important is that Pratham would not have been possible without the former staff who's here today in big numbers. I really don't want to name them because they're here, who started Pratham in Mumbai. And all the staff who's in the states watching this program, and all the young ones who have joined Pratham, college students, school students, and all, of course, my friends, and above all, our families who have almost given us away to Pratham. So thank you very much, and we are making a difference. We'll make a difference. Karwa chalta rahega. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. So after co-founder Farida Lambe, it is my pleasure now to invite on stage co-founder Dr. Madhav Chavan with some of key people from Pratham.
Where is Vijaya Dhumale? There's Vijaya Dhumale. So this song that you heard, Vijaya Dhumale was in the Doordarshan. At that time she was assistant station director. And we did a program called Akshardhara. So she was there. Where is Medha Kulkarni? Medha Kulkarni? Medha Kulkarni. She started the All India Radio. So these are my first media innings. They were my gurus. Thank you. The important thing about this is, Farida always takes spot shots at me. You see, the way I got Farida involved in this, or she got involved in this, was she was tempted to come on Doordarshan. She wanted to come on Doordarshan. So we were running this program, Akshardhara, and then when we took the camera to interview her, she was all made up, decked up and ready to go. So that's how we got her into the hook. And finally, we started working together. Anyway, I'm here because I want to introduce all of you to our champions from the foundation days who have helped us. There are far too many here who have helped in building Pratham. But there are some seniors. I call them elders. So I'm going to invite the elders on the stage, and then I'm going to request them to say a few words about whatever they have seen, done, and so on and so forth. So I must start first. Well, that person is actually going to be on Annapurni. Is Richard Bridle on Zoom? I can't hear Annapurni, but if he's there, I would like to see him. Richard Bridle was the state representative of UNICEF in Mumbai. Vijaya Chauhan, as you heard, was working with him. And he was responsible for communicating to the Mumbai city that there is a need for a societal mission, which is what we wanted Pratham to become. which would bring government, corporate sector, and civil society together. And he actually started this. So before us founding Pratham, he was already thinking of what it should be. Is he there? Annapurni, I can't see you. You're not even scared of me these days. Okay, so he is going to be there. Then after that, Mr. Vagul, then Chairman ICICI. Sir, can I give you a hand? Please come. We need a volunteer to escort, please. Then, immediately following Mr. Vagul, I would like to invite Mr. Sharad Kare, in whose office we actually took the decision to set up Pratham. He was the Municipal Commissioner of Mumbai at that time, and now he is the Chairman of Pratham Mumbai Education Initiative Trust. Mr. Ajay Piramal joined Pratham. I told him that I used to wave red flags outside his and he assured me that it will go wrong. So, he's been chairman. We have done a now, sorry, you have the Zoom on? No Zoom. Yeah, give us a few minutes. Okay. Now I would like to invite, I would take a break. Wahida ji, आपको ऊपर आना है. वैसे seniority से break हो गया है, लेकिन please. So this is looking like Jeena इसी का नाम है. For Pratham, please come. Now इनका क्यों? Pratham started expanding outside of Mumbai, mainly thanks to Mr. Vagul, because he would talk to people when he was traveling, when he was in lounges and so on. Hey, Richard, are you awake?
I'm here.
Yeah, you are there. Okay. Can we switch off all the lights so that we can see Richard better? Who's in charge? Yeah? Okay.
Oh.
That is Richard Bridle in Ottawa, Canada. Give me a few minutes, Richard. A few minutes. So Pratham started, the replication of Pratham in other cities started, and the first one to go was Mr. Vinod Khanna. I'll tell you the story some other time. Mr. Vinod Khanna, IFS, and used to be ambassador of not Pratham. Why am I saying Pratham all the time? He's ambassador of India in Indonesia and Cuba with Fidel Castro, but right now in Pratham Road. And then KB Kothari Saab. Retired from Unicef and set up Pratham Rajasthan. There are others I could invite, but right now that's the number of chairs we have. Do I have a chair? No, I don't have a chair. Devyani, you don't have a chair for me. Okay, so Richard, and there is one other gentleman waiting in the shadows. I hope he's awake. And he is also one of the champions and founders, but I won't tell you the name right now. So Richard, your turn now. What would you like to tell us about what led to the idea of creating something like Pratham?
Okay. Namaskar, and thank you very much, Madhav. Let me begin by greeting a number of old friends, Madhav, of course, Farida, Rukmini, and Vijaya Chauhan, whom I've not seen since 1997. It's so nice to hear all of those names. This is the 25th anniversary of Pratham, but as Madhav said, it did begin a few years before that. The actual genesis is it's like pretty much anything. It's completely accidental. I arrived in Mumbai, Bombay as it was then, in the autumn of 1992. And one of the first things that happened to me was there was a visit from the then mayor of Baltimore in the United States, Kurt Schmuck, an African-American mayor, who had decided that Baltimore should no longer be the garden city, but should become the city that reads, because he wanted to spread literacy throughout all of the poor neighborhoods of Baltimore. So we took him around Mumbai and we showed him some schools and so on. And then at the end of his visit, my boss, Amy Watanabe, who at that time was the Unicef country representative in India, said to me, "Richard, couldn't we do something similar here in Bombay?" And I, of course, said, "Well, yes, boss, I'll do whatever you say." And so then she left, and the staff of the office, Vijaya and others, we sat down and said, what have we let ourselves in for here? So we thought it through. We got some help from some colleagues in Delhi, and the first thing that we decided was, now if children are not fully enjoying their right to education and are not fully learning in the city, then something different needs to happen. And that difference that we thought of at that time was, we need to get the whole of the city involved in this. The state government, the municipal corporation, they're doing their best, but it's not quite getting there. So who are the movers and shakers in the city? And of course, as you know much better than I do, I only lived there for 5 years, but you've been around for a lot longer than that. Mumbai is the financial capital of India. Mumbai contains some of the most important companies in India, some of those big multinationals. Even then they were big multinationals. Mumbai is the entertainment capital of India. Mumbai is the media capital of India. So who were all of those people? Who made all of that work? And we set out and made a list of about 150 people who we considered to be the movers and shakers in the city of Mumbai. And then we wrote an individual letter to every single one of those people. And in that letter we said, it's important for you to get involved in children's education. Why is it important for you to do that? It's important because of what you do and what you expect from society, but it's also important because of how society should evolve, how India is modernizing, but also how India is dealing with its gross inequalities. And we got about half of those people came back to us, and we went and saw the half that came back to us. And eventually we ended up with about 45 people that we brought into a room and essentially said to them, well, we've all agreed that this is something that we should do, but what should we do about it? Because to be quite frank, we didn't really have much of an idea at that particular moment in time. And that was when Vijaya Chauhan said, well, we need to get a couple of people involved in this who actually know what they're talking about. And those two people were Madhav Chauhan and Farida Lambe. Together, they put together a situation analysis of education in the city, and they pinpointed a couple of very simple things that could be done to improve children's education, and that where civil society could get involved. And those two things were, first of all, increasing the preschool opportunities for children, particularly children living in the slum areas, and then also making sure that there were places where children could go after school or at the weekends, where they would be able to do their homework, do their studies, and so on. Because of course, when you're living in a place where you're in one room with about 6 to 10 people, that's really not possible. So just a couple of simple things that could be done. And then on from there, it became clear that this initiative was not going to go anywhere unless it became formalized in some way. Madhav had the idea of roping in a guy called S.S. Nadkarni. And some of you may have heard of him. He was the chair of the Security Exchange and I forget what it's called now, but we went to see Mr. Nadkarni. Mr. Nadkarni said, yes, I think you're on the right track. This is something that we should definitely do. I will support it. I'm going to get involved in it. And then, unfortunately, Mr. Nadkarni died the following week. And, you know, in any venture that you start, you're always going to be faced with with hurdles that you have to overcome. Now, the lucky thing is that someone like Madhav Chavan is never faced by hurdles. So Madhav said, I'm going to get in touch with Mr. Vagul at ICICI. And he brought Mr. Vagul on board. And Mr. Vagul then became the first chair of the public trust that was established as Pratham Mumbai. Because remember, this was originally it was just the city of Bombay. We thought that was that was enough of an ambition, just the city. So the trust was registered. It had ICICI, it had Unicef, it had the school education department of the state government, and it had the municipal corporation of Greater Mumbai as its 4 permanent members, and then there were others who would come and go. Now, I think that's really about as far as I can go. I'd just like to say a couple of other things. One was, from the very start, one of our major objectives was to make sure that this was not going to be a UNICEF project. It had to be something that was fully owned by the city of Mumbai. So over time, we were working to reduce the contribution that was made by UNICEF to the project, and that was greatly helped by Mr. Vagul putting ICICI funds into the project, and of course by Mrs. Bansal and Mr. Kale putting government money into it. Reduce that contribution, and when I left India in 1997, fortuitously, serendipitously, paradoxically, my successor decided that things that I had done were pretty worthless, so he withdrew UNICEF support. Actually, that was probably one of the great impetuses for Pratham. It meant that Pratham was completely independent of UNICEF, and I'm so happy that that happened. Second thing that I would like to say is this. Pratham began as a small initiative. It's one of the things that has always characterized that initiative is the part that is played by various components of society, and that this is something that Pratham has maintained throughout its history. The thing that's blown me away is that what we thought was very ambitious to do something in the city of Mumbai, Pratham has way surpassed that, and has become, as you know, a major force throughout India in education, with the annual State of Education report with the work that was done in order to get the Supreme Court to declare education a fundamental right and not a directive principle under the Constitution. With the work that Pratham has been doing in neighboring countries, with, as I see in its Twitter feed, lots, even influence in Africa these days. So it's, I guess the message is, as you know, 25th anniversary is silver. And my hope for Pratham is that it's going to go for gold. And it's going to keep its ambitions. It's going to move further. It's going to be the major force in education. I am so proud of all of you for what you have done to help fulfill the fundamental rights of children, and I have every confidence that in the next 25 years you will be able to do even more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Could we have the lights, please? Could we have the lights? It's 5 o'clock in Ottawa. I didn't know people could talk that much that early.
Richard always talks, you know that.
Of course, we can't have everybody speaking for 16 minutes. But I would really like some brief remarks from all of you. So, shall we start with Mr. Kale immediately? Because the meeting to create Pratham was held in your chambers, I know that. There were several people present there.
I feel so privileged to have this opportunity to talk about Pratham. And if I may say so, we are used to an accidental Prime Minister, recently an accidental Chief Minister. And in a sense, I was also accidentally associated with Pratham. Because I happened to be the municipal commissioner when Mr. Bridle got the bright idea, and he got the great support of persons like Dr. Madhav Chauhan, Farida Lambe, Rukmini Banerjee, and so many others. And actually it started in '93, though their birth certificate shows 95. But in a sense, we were incubating Pratham till about 95. And in 93, it started, and I was very happy to associate myself with something that was very constructive. And I must thank Mr. Bridle for the initiative that he took in this. At this point, I would like to also mention some persons who are not here, though they were very much associated. First of all, I would like to mention Kumud Bansal, who was the Secretary Education, and subsequently, throughout, she had been helping Pratham. Mr. Ratnakar Gaikwad, who was the Additional Municipal Commissioner and took great interest in this activity. Bahu Gawande, who is here, many education officers of the Municipal Corporation, they contributed in their own way. And you know, when Municipal Corporation wants to contribute, it doesn't do anything in a small fashion. Municipal Corporation, this is one of the biggest corporations in the country. And though we constantly hear bad things, but it is doing a lot of good things also. And this is one of the best things that the Municipal Corporation did, mainly because there was some initiative coming from people like Mr. Bridle. So I am very glad that I had this opportunity of speaking here, and on this official birthday of Pratham, I wish them many, many happy returns, and if possible, also replications. I think Pratham has become globally known NGO, particularly after the annual survey of Asar reports which have started coming from Pratham. In fact, the Asar report is considered a kind of almost a gold standard for these kinds of reports, and it's probably the most reliable picture of education in India which we get from the Asar reports. I am sure with Madhav, Farida, Rukmini and all their colleagues, Pratham will continue its march from here to many more peaks of achievement. Thank you.
I just want to say a word about Mr. Kale because he keeps us grounded, and we want to fly very high, but since he's our chairman of Pratham Mumbai, he'll always make sure that we are on the ground. And I think it resonates with Pratham that we like to be on the ground and we can do much more. So thank you, Mr. Kale, for being here.
I would really now like to request Mr. Vinod Khanna. We will come there eventually because you have a story to tell. You and I, remember how we met? I know the story. I don't know whether you remember it the same way because there are many stories and people have different ways of interpreting. So please.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I feel sort of quite uniquely honored for multiple reasons. One, I'm sitting next to my favorite actress. Two, I've been preceded by Sharad Kale. Sorry, I've got a sore throat. That's good fortune for you. Otherwise, I would have delivered a long speech. Sharad and I joined the government together in the year 1963. So, 63's contribution to Pratham. Yes, you know, after I sort of voluntarily retired from the Indian Foreign Service, I decided that the field I wanted to come into was education for the economically disadvantaged. And I had no clue as to where I should begin and how. And purely by accident, I was invited to a meeting, because at those days I was helping another NGO. It was a meeting of NGOs. I arrived on time or a little before time, and there was only one other person sitting around the table at that time. So I went and sat next to him. I introduced myself, he introduced himself, Madhav Chavan, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he told me what he was doing. I said, "Oh my God, why don't you do a similar thing in Delhi?" And in typical Madhav way, he doesn't know me from Adam and says, "Well, you do it in Delhi." So that's how it all began. But anyway, some things happened later. There's a very critical role of Mr. Vaghul. You know, Mr. Vaghul made a presentation somewhere I think in Mumbai, on the work that Pratham was doing. Amongst the people present was Mrs. Sonia Gandhi. She went back to Delhi and pulled up the chief minister. Sheila Dixit said, "Hey, what's happening in Mumbai? What is Delhi up to?" So there was something called Rajiv Gandhi Foundation. I think it's still there. So they got together and they invited all the NGOs in the field of education. And I was not yet associated with Pratham. I was trying to finish a couple of books. Madhav dragged me there, and there were 34 NGOs as well as officials of the government, etc. And they decided to, in a typical way, put together a committee. And before I knew, I was the convener of that committee. So we were trying to decide what to do. So I presented the Pratham formula. In the meanwhile, I'd been to Bombay. Rukmini had very kindly brought me to Chembur, as a matter of fact. And I was all full of Pratham. Absolute no response whatsoever. People said all sorts of reactions. Reactions included, you think, of course, Bombay has all the money. You think they have also all the brains? Don't we have brains in Delhi? and so on and so forth. So for 3 or 4 months, we struggled with various things. Not a single new child got educated. So I said, thank you, you people can continue. I'm going to launch Pratham in Delhi. So that is all how it started. And once again, Mr. Vagul came into the picture. I didn't have a penny. I didn't have a roof over my head. As far as Pratham was concerned, he gave directions to Pratham ICICI in Delhi. Give him a cabin in their office. So that's how we got started. In a small little way, and there's something in the magic of Pratham, in the manner in which it responds to a felt need of society, in a manner which is decent and honorable, that it just spread like magic fire. And so here we are. Incidentally, I should mention, though all this is Delhi, I am very proud to be a Bombayite. And much of my inspiration comes from my schooling and college in St. Xavier's, Bombay. Thank you all, and a very happy birthday, Pratham.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Just as the Pratham was replicating in the cities, so in a way, Mr. Vinod Khanna represents the Pratham city initiatives. You already heard Rohini and Nandan Nilekani on the videos. They represented what was supposed to be Pratham Bangalore, but they decided to call themselves Akshara Foundation. Actually, no, that's the other way around. Anyway, so there were city initiatives and then there were state initiatives. So one of the things that came out was Pratham Rajasthan. So let me request KBG to briefly tell us about it.
Thank you, Madhav. I must say that after several years of working in various capacities in the field of education, nationally and internationally, when I was returning to Rajasthan after 40 years of my work, I was looking for an opportunity to engage in a kind of work which I thought I would be able to really make some contribution in Rajasthan. And at that time, Madhav and Rukmini visited in the year 2000 in Jaipur, and we had a wonderful meeting in terms of Madhav and Rukmini asking me if I could look into Rajasthan area and Pratham's work. I didn't know much about Pratham's work at that time, but the environment in Rajasthan at that time, we had some of the nations and internationally most renowned educationists from Rajasthan working very well. Anil Bhotia, Shahgaji, Rohit Sarkar, and all these. This environment of education was so much charged with these people, the way of thinking and asking for solutions. And here, when I learned about Pratham, it was my also a journey for relearning how education is an important contribution in bringing about a societal change. And here, the Pratham contribution is a very hard environment in Rajasthan, because these were the so-called Shiksha Vidwan. These were the people who were known in India and internationally some of the most important contributions. Not that they did not make a very significant contribution, but they were looking at the solution and problems in a manner which required different kind of approaches and also working in the field of education. And here I would like to bring about the way in which I also journeyed with Pratham in terms of looking at when the idea of reading, and Madhav, I would say the year in 2005, consistently visited every month in Rajasthan and interacting with volunteers, how they are running the bridge courses in which the children were learning music, alphabet and arithmetic. And from there, I think the several meetings that Madhav and Rukmini had during the experience with the volunteers, the emergence of the idea of कैसे पढ़ना सीखते हैं बच्चे, this was an important contribution that brought the way in which the leadership from Madhav and Rukmini looked at the problems in terms of finding out the simple solution. The solutions which are not, when I was working with several other organizations like Unicef, we were thinking how to improve the quality of education. We came out with the 32 variables, 32 indicators, 35 indicators to improve the quality of education. But here was the contribution that look at 2 or 3 things which can simply be contributing to the quality of education, the reading and the basic arithmetic. And this was a very fundamental contribution of Unicef in the initial stages to really discover the way in which children learn and learn from foundational ages, years, to really acquire the language and arithmetic. The second contribution that I believe which was the most important in Pratham's growth was really recruiting the most young 7th or 8th or 10th class volunteers to really get trained in 2 or 3 days to really start teaching children in terms of basic alphabet and arithmetic. This is the most fundamental contribution. I think globally I don't see any comparable movement in educational change which really can be brought about by the kind of volunteers that have. You will not believe the kind of volunteers I have worked with last 20 years in Rajasthan. These volunteers, I must have worked more than 25,000 or 30,000 volunteers in these last 20, 25 years. Some of them have really developed their personality in a manner which no other educational system is capable of producing the children. You come from very poor background, very limited kind of training and learning, and really contributing the kind of leadership skills, kind of communication ability, the kind of relating with the community in a manner that the learning really takes place. The third contribution I would like to really make is that the consolidation of this learning of Pratham resulted into the kind of research that we did. And the ASAR is another one of the most landmark, remarkable instruments of really measuring, and I don't have to really say more about ASAR, but it has made the most significant contribution in terms of really establishing 2 most simple indicators as the basis of assessing the quality of education in India. And I think these are the most fundamental contributions.
Thank you. Just a show of hands. How many people here, of course, Pratham people, who have worked outside of Mumbai? Raise your hands. Pune people? Is Pune as well? Okay. So a lot of people who have worked outside of Mumbai, in Rajasthan, in setting up other chapters, etc., are here today, and many are watching. Are we on Facebook? Yes, on Facebook as well. Now, Pratham started in Mumbai, replicated in different cities, then in different states, but at the same time there was something else happening, and it was happening overseas. Pratham acquired or created siblings overseas. Now, Anil Shah, where are you? Anil and Purnima, both. So, they are representing Pratham USA, I suppose. You have to represent Pratham USA now. Vijay Goradia could not come. Marie Goradia was here, but she's left for Houston. She was going to be here today. But so this is one example, please. And there is somebody else who also set up Pratham USA in New York, who is waiting. Maybe I should let him introduce himself. Can we switch off the lights and then show who this gentleman is? He set up Pratham USA first. Mr. Bagul, you know who I'm talking about. Okay. Lights gone. Who is this person? Introduce yourself.
Okay, I don't know if you can see me very well. If you don't, that's probably better. It's probably better to hear me than look at me. I'm Madhav. Hello, Mr. Bagul, Mr. Piramal, Vaida ji. I think I could recognize a few of you. I think Farida is also on the stage.
One moment.
Right.
This is Mr. Viral Acharya. Viral more or less joined Pratham, became Pratham crazy when he was visiting ICICI often. His professor Marty Subramaniam and Mr. Vagul were friends. And that's where the bug caught him, and then he started raising money in New York. And then he went on to set up Pratham in New York, and then he went and set up Pratham in UK. I'll show you who else is here from UK at that time at least. So Viral, go on.
Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you Madhav and Farida for involving me in these celebrations. It's my pleasure and privilege to be here. What I'll do is I'll just describe my personal journey with Pratham. I think in a way it's a very fascinating story. When I look back at it, it always brings me smile, happiness, and a certain level of contentment in that association. So as Madhav mentioned, I was a student at New York University starting in 1995. I came here to do a PhD in computer science. Like most undergraduates, I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. So after 1 year, I changed my major to finance and economics. It was a very big change, a leap of faith that somehow this other subject will be the right subject for me. As you know, in 1995, computer science was very hot. So it might have been a crazy thing to do at that time to junk it and switch to finance and economics. But I was just looking for something that excited me rather than something that was good for me, financially or career-wise. Now, if some of you have done a PhD, you know that in year 3 of your PhD, you do all but dissertation. You do absolutely nothing in year 3 and 4 of your PhD life. And it so happened that the time that Richard mentioned, which is 1997, when Pratham was fortuitously, as he put it, weaned off Unicef, I happened to be in my all but dissertation phase of life, like doing nothing useful effectively. I had an interest in Bollywood songs. I used to sing at IIT Bombay. There was a very large contingent of Indian students in New York. Some of us got together and we said, if we are not doing our PhDs, we ought to sing songs. And so we set up a band. The band was called Sur Bahar. It was the same name that our music band had in IIT Bombay. In fact, last year in December, I sang there as a deputy governor of the Reserve Bank of India. I was out there singing on stage. Anyways, we set up a band. It was called Sur Bahar. We had about 6 or 7 singers. We were all amateurs, but reasonably decent to sing on stage. We had a band from New Jersey that would accompany us for practices and stuff. So, we had a lot of ambition. We didn't realize that, we were getting onto something like Pratham at all. In fact, I had not even heard of Pratham. But the conversation that our band had was, okay, we are excited, we are ambitious, we can sing, but who's going to buy our tickets for the show? So we had rented this auditorium at Columbia. It's right on 116th Street and Broadway. And we were basically looking for a way to get people to enter the auditorium and listen to us. And at this point, one of our common friends, Madhav, and my common friend, Kavita Kulkarni, she was helping us with some of the organizational parts. And Madhav was visiting from India. I think he was visiting probably for networking. I have no clue. I think sometimes things just happen. Madhav just flies into the right places from India to, wherever there is going to be coordinated interest in Pratham. And so he was there, we met, and Madhav sort of explained roughly to us what Pratham was doing. Of course, as a young Indian who had essentially gone through the education system entirely free, including IIT. I remember my IIT fees in my first year were 265 rupees. And then when I graduated, it was 465 rupees. So, I'd essentially had very high quality education from the Indian system at practically zero cost. And of course, when you have done that, you are very grateful to the society. We want to give it back in some way or the other. And we all thought, what better way to do this than be associated with Pratham. Now, let me be very frank. Even though we joined hands with Pratham, the Sur Bahar, our band, at that point, I was not so interested in Pratham. I was interested in selling the tickets to our show. And we thought that association with Pratham, it was such a noble cause. It would be so inspiring that people will come and witness us sing, no matter what the quality of our songs and singing and band. And then, we did the show. I have a very distinct memory that Mr. Vagul, Madhav managed to get Mr. Vagul to be the chief guest at our show. I was just hoping that at least when Mr. Vagul is in the auditorium, we would sing well. And I think we did okay. And I think that was really the beginning. The show was a big success. It was clearly organized at an amateurish level, but it had a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy. A lot of young people were involved in putting it together. I would say probably 30-40 volunteers from NYU and sort of our related social circles. And I think in a way, I think that was the moment when I got onto Pratham. And Madhav always used to say this in our conversations, that Pratham should be visualized more as a movement. It's a movement to get education across to children in the Balwadis, in the slum areas, in the villages, in the underprivileged parts of the society. And that it's not about any specific thing, that's going to evolve. He always used to say this, that what we are doing, at what point, who the agents of change are, what exactly are we focused on at a given point of time. It will all keep evolving within the broad framework that the models have to be low cost, scalable, and replicable. And I remember these are some of the key ideas of Pratham that had grappled my mind when I got associated with it. And I think these ideas are very important and powerful, because when you talk about Pratham to anyone outside, even to an Indian who's outside, their first reaction is, oh, the scale of the problem is too big, so don't we have to start small? Don't we have to just do something very well in a small pocket of India? And I think Farida, Madhav, Rukmini, I think through their very analytical approach to this massive and I would say a colossal problem, or not a problem, I would say an issue, I think what they've demonstrated is that it's not necessarily the case that small is beautiful when it comes to providing education, when it comes to providing literacy. That you can actually go for the low-hanging fruit, but on a large scale. And I think in the end, that is what sort of galvanized me. If I could speak one sentence in Hindi, I think more than the fact that I was a bit lost in doing my PhD and didn't have the right context as to why I was doing what I was doing, there's often a phase in our lives when हमें काम की नहीं खुद की तलाश होती है. You are in search of yourself rather than for work. And my sense is, in a very subtle way, Pratham helped me discover myself. I think it helped me realize that besides my academic pursuits, I enjoyed working with people. This is, of course, a key part of everything Pratham does. It has a large number of volunteers, I would say a huge number of female volunteers in the cities and in other parts of the country. It also has something where you have to have the inspiration from inside to do this. Clearly, a lot of people associated with Pratham could be doing other stuff for their own lives, but they don't. They get inspired by this cause because I think it is so compelling. And third, it requires it requires being part of this movement, as I was saying. It's not clear what exactly you are at any point of time in it. Sort of strong current is flowing, and you're going to be part of it for a short while along the way. And I think I felt a great sense of empowerment actually when I did the work for Pratham. I'm sure all the volunteers on the ground would feel this even more. I think Pratham is a movement that empowers the citizens to actually do something about this big issue or challenge in front of us. So, we moved on actually. My association with Pratham moved on from just the band. We realized that in order to raise funds, we had to set up a 501c3 charity in the US. My wife, Manjari Jog, who was not my wife then, and 2 other volunteers, we started doing this work. And then we realized that sky is the limit. Singing songs for Pratham is just one way that we could actually contribute to this cause, but we could be reaching out to high net worth individuals in the New York City. We could be doing presentations to corporate foundations and endowments. We could be organizing charity balls, something I had never heard of until I got associated with Pratham. I didn't realize that rich people get together one evening and donate monies to good causes. I had never realized this. Gradually we started putting it all together. Now, one thing I want to point out that my association with Pratham is Pratham USA first in New York and Pratham UK in London until 2007 was entirely we were functioning fully on a volunteer capacity. And this is what I loved the most about what we were doing. And I'll tell you why. For a couple of reasons, I had to, in the end, sort of leave Pratham, at least temporarily, behind. But what I liked the most was we didn't have a single paid employee in this charity. We were an entirely sort of amateurish volunteer-run outfit. Now, the good part of it was, I think it was the right model when Pratham USA was young, because I think it just brought so much energy. There was just, you had to be deeply committed to the cause, to the work that Madhav, Rukmini, Farida and team were doing on the ground, that Mr. Vagul, Mr. Piramal and Baidaji were supporting through their time contributions, and of course all the volunteers who were pitching in with all they had. And so in that sense, it was almost like a social, I would call it like a social enterprise. It was like a social venture capital firm where, the capital was really the human capital. It was the time and the energy and, the tremendous commitment that came with it. The fact that no one was actually getting paid anything, but really we were all completely devoted to the cause. And there was something tremendously, deeply satisfying about it. I didn't realize it at the time, but now that I'm 10, 12 years past that, and I look back upon it, I think this may be, I think I could quibble here and there, but I think this may be the most satisfying thing I've done in my life. I think it just makes me feel so good to have given time and have had the opportunity actually to work with the Pratham staff over a period of time. Anyway, I should mention here that not everything was smooth. There was actually an India education initiative that Mr. Vagul had helped shepherd. It was to bring all the top industrialists of the country together into supporting Pratham at the high level. And there were a lot of parallel efforts underway, maybe Premji Foundation, some other foundations, and we thought we could bring it all together under one umbrella. We thought New York would be the right place to launch it. So through some of my roommates at that time who were associated with New York Stock Exchange, we had lined up a very big charity ball. Well, it so happened that the charity ball was on 12th September 2001. And as you know, on 11th September, all hell broke loose. I was actually supposed to be at New York Stock Exchange at 10 a.m. And Manjari, my wife, who was already at work then, she called me at 9 saying, wake up, something has happened. And, I switched on the TV and I have to say, at that instant, it took me a few minutes to recognize the humanitarian crisis that was about to unfold with the strikes of 9/11. But my first reaction to the event, I'll be very frank, was, okay, what's going to happen to the Pratham Ball? Because we'd been working with the pro bono McKinsey team very intensely to organize the event. Anyway, as you can imagine, the thing didn't happen. The India Education Initiative eventually didn't take hold. Pratham Education Initiative got formed at that point. I have to mention there were a few corporates who, in spite of the tragedy, actually continued with their contributions, whatever they had earmarked for the Pratham Ball. That was very heartening for the volunteers. We were hoping to raise something in the range of $200,000 to $250,000. By the ambitions of a student initiative, that was going to be like a 5-fold increase in what we had done for Pratham. But I think the volunteers stayed on course. Now, it so happened that I had just finished my PhD. I think the fact that I had done this thing for Pratham had actually given me a sense of direction that if children in Balwadis can get educated, I can also finish my PhD. And I did it. I went to London Business School, and after about 18 months, another sort of group of like-minded folks got together there. Manveen Koticha, Purva Koticha, along with Manjari, I and some others, then set up Pratham UK. Around 2000, so I think, the Pratham UK compared to Pratham USA was a slightly more organized model. It was not exactly just a student or an amateurish initiative. It was well organized. But actually, for 5 years that I was associated with Pratham UK, it was still essentially a volunteer-run model. We were now doing sort of marathon or various race participations. We were organizing a charity ball every year. Mrs. Ramola Bachchan and Mrs. Surina Narula were two of our sort of ball organizers, and I think they helped Pratham UK tremendously. And this was the time when I got to know and interact with Vahidaji, sort of another very important association during that time. Thank you, Vahidaji, for supporting our volunteer initiative in London with your gracious presence. And I think I realized at some point that three things, if I could, and I'll wrap up. One, that I was spending close to 50% of my life at that time on Pratham, remaining 25% on my full-time job and 25% on family. So at some point I had to reprioritize life a little bit in the personal and professional direction. I also realized that my strength was more in starting something new, getting the energy of young people together into an organization, building a team. But perhaps I was not good at doing what Pratham USA and Pratham UK needed next, which was to get professionalized and become sort of very big charities that would go from raising $500,000 or $1 million to several $1 million over time. And so in around 2007, I stepped down. And others took over. And I think looking at both Pratham USA and Pratham UK, in hindsight, if you look at how successful and stable models of ancillary institutions that are supporting Pratham's excellent work are, I would say it shows that Pratham is really a movement. When I left Pratham USA and Pratham UK, we did not know what the succession strategy was, how these organizations would evolve. But they found their stability because I think it's a very powerful force that is attracting a lot of like-minded people. Either they want to be empowered themselves or they want to empower others, and they are in a position to do so. But whatever it is, it works, it clicks. It's all sort of happening as we speak, maybe in ways that we don't yet know, but we'll be able to appreciate only 10 years down the line. But I think it's all going on because of the efforts of all of you who are in the audience. All of you are associated with Pratham as administrative staff or teachers or in whatever capacity you are contributing to Pratham. I think it's really your work. It's your reaching the child at the last mile, enabling them to read, to write, to count. You know that every parent or whoever has seen a young child knows that eureka moment that a child has when they read for the first time and they want to flip through the book again and again and again, reading the same pages, because it's an empowerment of the child, so to speak, when they can read on their own. And I think it is those moments that I think galvanize people like me and others who are outside, very far removed from Pratham's work, on the ground, at least on a day-to-day basis. So I think I'll stop there. I want to thank Mr. Vagul, Mr. Madhav Chavan, Rukmini, Farida for giving me the opportunity to be associated with Pratham. I really think of this as one of the best things to have happened to me in life. And I hope that at some point of time when I settle down in my professional career and have once again nothing to do and I'm in search of myself, I'm sure my path will in one way or the other stumble upon Pratham, and I'll do a lot more than I've been doing in the last 10 years. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I think you want to hear somebody else, and we have none other than Vaidaji. I don't have to introduce. I just want to say she's an institution by herself. When you define beauty, style, grace, aging gracefully, that's Vaidaji for us. So it's not about she being a great actress and we enjoying all her films, but a lovely human being to be with. And whatever she does it with passion. We've been very, very lucky to have her as our ambassador. When we went to meet her, she said, "Mujhe kya karna hai?" So Madhav, in his characteristic style said, "कुछ ज़्यादा नहीं करना है, हमारे साथ कहाँ यहाँ वहाँ आना है और प्रथम के बारे में बात करनी है." So, but she didn't know what she was in for, and she has come to Pratham US. She's done 11 cities in 14 days. And after that, she said, "I don't want to come to the US at all." But you know Pratham, you know Madhav, you know all of us, we've continuously troubled her. And I think it has been a great, great privilege, joy to be with her. Thank you, Vaidaji, for all your passion for children. She's an ardent photographer, and she's doing a lot of other things which I'm not going to talk about because we really don't have the time, and we need to hear her. She had asked me, मुझे बात करने के लिए बिल्कुल बोलो मत. I said, no, आप बिल्कुल बात मत कीजिए, आप सिर्फ आइए. But she knows that we never keep our promises.
To Pratham. No. Happy birthday to Pratham. मैंने एक बार note की है that whoever joins Pratham, there is some magnet in them that you don't leave. I tried to get out of the whole thing, but they brought me back. So I'm still there. So I see everybody whom I met them for the first time, they are still there. They all of them, like Madhav, Rukmini, Farida, and anybody and everybody so dedicated to this cause, and so nice to see them, and really happy, doing great. All the best and success to you, Pratham.
Being an actor, you need dialogues written for you. And I remember we went to Jaipur, And so we were there sitting, she was the star, of course. I was sitting at one corner, and she was sitting next to the minister. And then the government people said, Wahida ji ko kuch padhne ke liye do. And Wahida ji is looking at me and saying, no. मैं बोला क्या हो गया? They said, no. I knew what the problem was. So they brought a whole speech to be read by Wahida ji and gave it to her. And she just brushed it aside and then stood in front of the children. I'm going to let out your secret. आपका सीक्रेट बता रहा हूँ मैं. नहीं, आपको याद नहीं है? आपको लिख के दिया था पढ़ने के लिए. हाँ. So it was all there, and she went to the children. Children were sitting in front in hot sun. You know how schools treat children. वो सब बैठे हुए थे, and वहीदा जी को कहते, बच्चों ऐसा है कि मुझे पढ़ना तो आता है, लेकिन हिंदी पढ़ना नहीं आता. So next day she says, start teaching me. I want to become literate in Hindi. She reads English and Urdu fine. She doesn't know Hindi. Secret बताना ही चाहिए ना थोड़ा. Okay. So now between the former chairman and the current chairman, who goes first? He goes first. Okay. He's ruled already, so I can't help it now.
If Mr. Wagul rules, which he did many years ago to force me to be the chairman, I cannot say no. So it was a while ago, and I was wondering that how does one give back to society? We are all very privileged, I felt, and there's something to give back. And that's when, as usual, Mr. Wagul, I refer most of the issues and he has answers. And he introduced me to Madhav, and here I am in Pratham. It was supposed to be that I was to give back something to society, to Pratham, and that's why I got associated with it. But actually, when I see over the last 2 decades, it's not me who has given back, but actually Pratham has given much more to me than what I have given to them. So it's not been a fair deal as far as for Pratham is concerned, but for me it's been very good. So what has Pratham given me? One is, Pratham has taught me that the problems that our country faces for so many centuries and decades, even after independence, cannot be solved by just getting some know-how from what's been done in the West or what's been done elsewhere in the world. But we have to have our own innovation. And if you look at what Pratham is doing, is that everything that what Madhav, Rukmini and the team is doing is to think differently, to find easy solutions to difficult problems which have not been solved for decades. So it taught me that innovation can help solve problems of the country. You don't need innovation only in technology, but even in the social sector. It also taught me that innovation cannot be done in the government system, because innovation by definition means there will be failure, there will be risk, and it has to be done by a non-profit outside of government organization. So that's one learning I got from Pratham. Second learning I got is that it's more important to do work at scale in a country like India with 130 crore population, 1.3 billion population. You can't just go for quality, and I know we used to have these big arguments, and there are many, I don't want to name them, but there were many high-profile NGOs in the space of education which would talk about what great impact they can make. But really it doesn't matter when so many people can not even don't even know how to read and write. How do you reach that last child to learn, to read and to write, to do math, is what I realized that scale is important. I also recognize that scale is important, but to do on scale, you have to work with government. And there are most majority of people in the government want to also do something. Sometimes they don't know how to do it. And that's what, again, Pratham taught me, that there may be there'll be different municipal commissioners, there'll be different secretaries, there'll be different political parties, but one has to work with all of them, and at the end of the day, you get success. What inspired me to come into Pratham was when I saw that people who are really giving selfless, people like Mr. Vagul, like Madhav, who were, just doing it for the love of doing it, for giving back something to society. That inspired me, that these are the type of people one has to be associated with, and that's what I have also learned from them. So, all in all, it's been a one-way traffic that I have learned more and I have gained more than what I have given. And for this, I have to first of all thank you, Mr. Vagul. I have to thank the whole team at Pratham. Such dedication, and this is my other thing that I've learned, is that in the social sector, you need people who join it because they want to do something, not because it's like a job. And when I see Madhav, when I see Rukmini, when I see Farida, and I see the whole team at Pratham, this is what keeps reminding me of it on a day-to-day basis. So what Pratham is today is, I can say with all honesty, not because of, and I hope my board will agree, it's not because of the board members, but it's because of this fantastic team that we have. So let's give them a hand. I want to thank all the donors. We have really scaled up to a big amount, and it is the largest NGO in education. It's only because of the donors. So once again, thank you. And special mention about Pratham USA, because the contribution that you do, sitting so many miles away, is tremendous. So thank you very much. I can keep on thanking so many people, but I want to now just end with what Wahida ji said, that once you get into Pratham, they don't let you get out. That I don't know. It is very true. So I've officially resigned retired as chairman many times, but somehow I don't seem to be, I still keep coming back. So I don't know what it is, Madhav. It's really like you've made me like a politician who doesn't want to give up the kursi. But nowadays it's dangerous, because you can be knocked off any time. So anyway, with that, I just want to thank Pratham for all that they are doing. Because of them, all of us, some good is coming to us also. So thank you very much.
I should really thank Mr. Ajay Piramal. Quiet strength and invisible hand that supports us. That's been you. Thank you. Before I go to our greatest champion, Mr. Vagul, let me introduce two people associated with Pratham UK at one point, Vilas and Rita Gadkari. Vilas was the chairman, but the real chairperson was Rita. Can you please stand up? Thank you. Because we did talk about Pratham UK. There are other organizations around the world called Pratham Sweden, for example, a little one, but now becoming big and so on and so forth. There are many board members here, but I won't make you all stand up. If there is, yeah. So now, Mr. Vagul, I will say you don't need any introduction, but you do. You do. But when you speak, sir, that's the introduction. You became the chairman of Pratham, and that changed Pratham forever. And I don't exaggerate at all, because without Mr. Vagul being the champion, the rock that he was, to start with, but not many people would have heard about Pratham. And we couldn't have imagined going into the corporate sector, the industry and business leaders, young people. Mr. Piramal was also young then. He's still young. But, and they all heard about Pratham, and the magic of Mr. Vagul worked. And of course, we were there, foot soldiers. But this is something that he did. And so now let's hear it from you. The floor is yours.
I will not compliment Pratham. I will not compliment you. I am not going to talk on education. I am not going to talk on anything else. On this birthday, perhaps I will share some memories with you. And first, mother walking into my room. Was it 1994, 95 or something like that?
95.
95. He walked into my room. I was a very busy chairman at the time. My time was very limited, and so few minutes I spent with him. He told me only one thing. My ambition is before the end of the millennium, 2000, every child in Bombay will have to be in school. I said, yes, I am with you. I mean, I didn't know him from Adam. I had not known him previously, but this idea captivated me, that every child should be in school. Nothing else I wanted. I said, here is a young man. He was a young man at the time. And he said, here is a young man who said that he wants his children to be in school. What better idea can be? And he puts a time limit. The challenge was powerful. The time limit was there in 6 years' time. Not that in another 20 years' time, 30 years' time, this would happen. So he wanted to happen in 6 years' time. I said, I am with you. I remember that event. Second, I went with him to the various corporates. We used to knock at the doors of several people. He had a budget. And that budget for a year or two, I don't remember that. This budget had to be prepared. Of course, we gave the initial startup funding. But who would meet the budget? The budget was a very hefty budget. So I said, let us go and talk to the corporates. I went with him door after door. I think we must have met about 10, 15 people at a time. He was very dispirited. Things were not happening the way in which he wanted to happen. I do recall, am I wrong or I thought of it and need not tell you, said, don't bother, I will underwrite the whole thing. ICICI will underwrite the whole budget. Don't bother about the budget. We will go and raise money. If money cannot be raised, you have the budget, underwrite. I don't know the third event I remember, again, when we went to Houston. You remember that? And when we went to Houston, Garudia organized a dinner and fundraising dinner. Several people were present. And he wanted me to speak. I wanted to say something which is inspiring. I said something which is foolish, not inspiring. Said, every dollar you contribute to Pratham, ICICI will contribute a matching $1 crore. You remember that? I thought the amounts will be very small. After all, I didn't expect the amount to be very large. I said, yes, I go ahead and contribute that. This you have to correct me. One gentleman gave the largest contribution in that meeting. And his name was Bombay Wala. No, he was a Bombay Wala. He contributed very significant amount, I don't remember. And when I asked him, he said, naturally Bombay Wala means he is interested in Bombay. We were talking of Pratham Bombay at the time. What shocked me was that he was a Pakistani with an interest in Bombay. And he was the person who made the largest contribution. And ultimately I had to write that very fat check. And for Pratham, I was not sorry for that. I said, I will do that. That was one aspect of Madhav. But you all think that Madhav is such a sober, calm, quiet person. He was not. He had modeled himself as the angry young man at that time. You know who was the angry young man? Huh? Amitabh Bachchan was the angry young man. And he always was the symbol of Amitabh Bachchan. I had to manage him more than anybody else. Because he was whole goal-oriented, goal-obsessed, saying, I must achieve this, I must do this. He would not accept any obstacles into the whole thing. I said, I'm not bothered about it. I have to kick the obstacle. I won't jump over the obstacle. And he would land me in several difficulties at that time. Remember the young man? And I had to counsel him and said, go slow, we'll achieve the objective. And his colleague, Rukmini, one day came to my room and alone. They all used to come in a group, but she came alone. You were also there, Farida? And says, Mr. Vogel, Madhav is not with us, but this is about Madhav we want to talk to you. I said, what is it? See, in Chembur or Godkopur, I don't know. Chembur Municipal School, during monsoon it used to be flooded. And children would not have any place to sit and study. So, you remember that? I think, is it Chembur? And Rukmini said, we want to construct a school classroom there so that it can be above the water, so the students can. But Madhav had put a restriction, namely money cannot be spent on infrastructure. Because we had decided that the motto of Pratham will be, we will work with the government. We will use the government infrastructure, we will not create our own infrastructure. So every rupee we collect will have to go to that soft fund, that namely that spending on teachers and other things. So what Rukmini said that we have to make an exception here, but Madhav will not make that exception. So you have to permit us. I said, yes, go ahead with that. And I was the chairman of the board, I said, I will convince him on going on. We constructed that. And when we went there, the construction was complete, but the municipal corporation did not give the occupancy certificate. That instance I remember. That occupancy certificate was not given. I remember going with Rukmini and Farida also to that complex. I said, I liked it, but why? What's the problem? So it's the usual bureaucratic delay. I remember one teacher, she was a Urdu teacher. You remember that? Huh? Urdu head teacher. She came to me and said, well, I was not very fond of Hindi at that time. She spoke to me in Hindi. I said, who is the government to come in the way of my starting it? Monsoon is coming, I am going to start my class. Whether the government gives permission or not. I said, remember that? I don't care, I am going to start it. She inaugurated the whole thing. She said that this is for the children and I am ready. I think Rukmini used to put me in great difficulties those days. I used to go with her. I had a problem. I was not 25 years back. I was in my early 60s. So there's no problem at all for me to walk around. But the difficulty was in Bombay or anywhere, I cannot speak their language. I cannot speak Marathi, I cannot speak Hindi. I can speak English, but I can speak Tamil also. But that didn't help me. So Rukmini's problem was that I should go with them. And I remember in one schoolroom you organized a meet of the teachers. And she wanted me to speak to the teachers. But there were about 100 people present in that. I said, I can't speak. I mean, if I speak in English, they can't understand that. Those days I used to speak well in English, not like this. I was a much better speaker at that time. And she said, no sir, you must speak. And that was the first Hindi speech I ever made. And I struggled and struggled. And Rukmini said, no, she won't give up. You go ahead and make that speech. Like that, there are umpteen incidents that come to my mind. This was the way in which Pratham was brought up. Suddenly, when it reached its a particular stage, the growth was exponential. I remember even in Pratham USA, before the Pratham USA was born, Viral Acharya was telling me about the music, Surbahar music show. We used to organize this music show. Do you know who was the star singer? Viral Acharya was the star singer. You know what he used to sing? Amar Akbar Antani. You remember that? The one, there was a song, Amar Akbar Antani. Something like that. And he was the person who was singing. He was very fond of Amitabh Bachchan's song. Here was another Amitabh Bachchan sitting next to me. It is Amitabh Bachchan's songs were being done. So it was wonderful growing with Pratham. And at some point of time, the inflection point took off. We gradually grew. And of course, we can go on and on, the incidents, how difficult it was for us to graduate out of Bombay into the All India. We were struggling with the organizational structure, whether we should have a unitary organization or we should have a federal organization. We should have separate trusts in each of the countries. That's a difficult thing. I think Vinod was there in Delhi, and suddenly I think the idea came to us, why are we fighting shy of this? We'll create this unitary organization and go on. So I'm so happy that Pratham has grown like this. But remember one thing, we are only in the state of adulthood. We have a long, long way to go. The country has a long, long way to go. And even though Pratham has achieved an enormous amount of growth, do you think that we have come anywhere near in the achievement of the education goals? We are not. We are still sort of a pygmy. I think I can say, like, I don't remember that Robert Frost saying, one of the problems of old age is you forget so many things. And what is it that? Miles and miles go before we sleep. The forest is deep. Like that, we have a long way to go before achieve our goal. It won't happen during my lifetime. It's like saying you plant a seed, the tree will grow. But I'm sure the tree will grow. I'm sure that we will reach our position in the world. At some point of time, we'll reach our position in the world. Whether it happens in 5 years' time, whether it happens in 10 years' time or 20 years' time, I think Madhav and I should have one satisfaction, that we have sown the seed and the tree will grow. And it has reached the adulthood, nothing can stop its growth. Thank you very much for everything.
More about Mr. Vagul, that all our staff who's here, who's been working with us, Mr. Vagul, you've always met them and used to meet them and give a lot of sessions on philosophy and how to really work. So I think everybody here who's been long enough in Pratham really enjoyed your sessions. So it was not only about money or what you did for Pratham, but actually getting to talk to our people was, I think, wonderful. And they always cherish this from you. I want to mention one very important name is Dr. Armaiti Desai, who was not able to come here today. She was trying her best, but she has a back problem. She has been my mentor. She was one of our founder trustees of Pratham, Director, Tata Institute, Principal, College of Social Work, UGC chairperson, and she's completely passionate about primary education. I would not have been in this field if not for her. So I think I really, really miss her today. And she has sent a message of happy birthday to all of us. And she has also said that you're sitting in a place, the convention center, which is actually her creation as the former director of Tata Institute. So she's told all of us to enjoy. One more small part of history. Our first check for Pratham initiative came from Mr. Palia, Bombay Community Public Trust, who was supposed to be here. He's in Ahmedabad, a little not well, so he's also sent his wishes. He's also missed, but he was very, very happy when we reached out to him and he said all the best. So thank you very much.
So now a group picture, but before that, everyone gets one memento. What can we give you that you don't have? But there is something that we would like to give you. Memories of Pratham. Your pictures in Pratham. with some writings of the Pratham children. Yeah? You can sit down. Ajay? Now we would like you to come here, please, and then we'll take a picture. We suddenly found that we don't have pictures of the 25 years. Now, so all of you, if you have any pictures of Pratham, then please send them to Shatanand. Where is Shatanand in the booth up there? Ah, there he is. How do I send it to you? You have to give the email. Please come. No, with that. Yes. Thoda show. These are your pictures. You look younger in this. Yeah. Actually, there is Bhau Gawande who was there as well. In one of those pictures, you're giving the key to him, forcing him to take the key. Yeah. Okay. Come. Thank you. We realize it's getting a little late. We have the panel discussion following this. Thank you. And those who are sitting in the aisles, there are some empty chairs if you would like to now be a little more comfortable. Thank you.
मैं लाखों में एक हूँ शिक्षा की एक बात सुनाऊं थोड़ा थोड़ा सुन ले तू लाखों लाख है भारतवासी मैं लाखों में एक हूँ सुन ले मेरी बात जरा और हो जा
Thank you everyone. I just want to say that this is not a break, so if anybody is leaving, of course you're welcome to leave, but we still have a very important part of the event left, which is a panel discussion with some distinguished panelists who I'm going to introduce now. But I just wanted to share with everyone that we spent majority of our time today talking about the past, but in the discussion we're going to talk about the future. So the panel discussion is titled Education in India Today and Tomorrow, and we have very significant education panelists with us today. So if that's a topic that interests you, I'd request you to stay back. I'll give everyone 5 minutes to rearrange. Okay, I'm going to request Pratham CEO Dr. Rukmini Banerjee to please come on stage as I introduce the panelists, because I think we might lose too much time. I'd request all Pratham folks to please take a seat. Can I request all Pratham members to please take a seat? Thank you.
Please, I would request everyone, please take your seats. You can move ahead a little bit, because there are some empty seats in front. These are all the VIPs are not going. Give it 5 minutes. Can everyone take their seats, please, so we can move to the next? Some look. Let people sit down. Sit down. Please take a seat. Please take a seat. Hi. Bye. Thanks.
Can I please request everyone to take their seats? Thank you so much.
Shivaji, we want you to make everybody sit down. Rajesh, show that you are Pratham leaders and people listen to you. No.
Okay. So I'd like to invite the panelists on stage. And once again, as I introduce them, I'd request everyone to please take a seat. Okay. So our first panelist for today is Aditya Natraj, a chartered account by academic training and an MBA from INSEAD. Aditya Natraj is the founder of Kevalya Education Foundation. From working with a range of corporate consulting firms like KPMG to World Bank, to heading the operations of Pratham Gujarat, Aditya has had a varied and interesting career so far. He has been awarded with various fellowships and awards, and prominent them include Ashoka Fellowship, Echoing Green Fellowship, Aspen India Fellowship, and the Times Now Amazing Indian Award in the education category. Welcome, Aditya.
Welcome.
Our second panelist for today is Shaheen Mistry. Shaheen Mistry is the CEO of Teach for India and serves as one of its founding board members, having started the organization with a group of friends. She founded the first Akanksha Center in 1989, which evolved into Akanksha Foundation, an education non-profit working with children from low-income communities. Shaheen has been recognized as an Ashoka Fellow, a global leader for tomorrow at the World Economic Forum, and an Asia Society leader. She serves on the boards of Umeed, the Thermax Social Initiatives Foundation, the Akanksha Foundation, ISLI, Design for Change, and is an advisor to the Latika Rao Foundation. Thank you for coming, Shaheen. Our next panelist for today is Sridhar Rajagopalan. Sridhar Rajagopalan is the President and Chief Learning Officer of Educational Initiatives. An engineer from IIT Madras and MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, he worked in IBM India for 2.5 years before co-founding and running the Eklavya School in Ahmedabad. He is a member of various central and state government committees related to education, including the Committee for Devising Model Rules for the RTE Act in Gujarat and NCERT's National Expert Group on Assessment in Elementary Education. A trustee of Pratham Gujarat, as well as other educational institutions, Sridhar has been an educational entrepreneur through his career. Welcome, Sridhar. Our last panelist for today is Nandita Shah. Nandita Shah is co-director and managing trustee of Akshara Center in Mumbai. Nandita Shah is a professional social worker, activist of the women's movement, and a gender trainer. She holds a PhD in social science from the University of Amsterdam and has represented India at many international platforms and is part of the Civil Society Advisory Group of UN Women's Multi-Country Office. Nandita has over 30 years of experience in strengthening the women's movement locally, nationally, and internationally, both through her activism and writing. Welcome, Nandita. Over to you, Rukmini.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for not leaving. It looks like people want to hear all the memories of the past. Here we are going to discuss the future. And I'm very, very honored to have the people we have here, each of them completely outstanding in their own spheres. And I hope that we will have a good discussion. So we've had a lot of discussion about the past and memories and so on. I thought what we'll do in our panel would be to really look forward into the future. And as part of, when you have a celebration, under the guise of the celebration, you can often get a lot of things done that you wanted to do anyway. So one of the things that I personally was very interested in, after reading the new draft education policy that came out in June, was to really wonder about how it was all put together and what the committee was thinking, because it seems to resonate with a lot of things that all of us are doing. And so we requested Madhav to interview Professor Kasturi Rangan. And I thought it might be a good idea to just start off our session with hearing what Professor Kasturi Rangan had to say. So I don't know who's controlling the videos. It's a short video. I made sure, okay? Okay, so can we see it?
You start something new in this country. I want to call education as new in this year.
If the video is not ready, we have things to say.
This question gets asked whenever you start something new in this country. I want to call education as...
So we know the video exists. We know the audio exists.
This question gets asked whenever you start something new in this country. I want to call education as new in this era. So we are talking about the 21st century educational policy. This is a policy, the earlier versions did not have that kind of an influence from things like internet, yet to just make a foray. And we have an education policy which is not touching, and you know what internet does today in the context of that. There's one example of it. There is this 4G revolution that is coming up, which is going to be disruptive. Then there is a question of sustainable development goals in which India is going to be a partner with major commitments, the kind of a thing. Then there is this question of a constant aspiration for every Indian, we should be at the 5 trillion economy and later 10 trillion, which are all important only because of the fact it influences many decisions. For example, 5 trillion economy, the rule of the game is very different from the other one. So one thing we should know, that a policy being written 25 years after the previous one cannot be, if there is a good reason that that should be the policy. The way has to be found to do it, not the other way. We have never been accustomed, this defeatist attitude is the one that has in several areas, even though India has succeeded in many areas in spite of this. But this defeatist attitude be generally not nurtured anymore. This is number one. When we started the space program, the people said, well, what use is it? And who can do this kind of a complex technology? And today we are as good as the best wherever we want to do the space. If it is remote sensing, we have the best satellites in the world. If it's communication, we have the launch vehicle, we have some of the best technologies in the launch vehicle. Now we are talking about human space flight simply because others have done it and we will be among the most three. So all in the happen of 50 years. So in 50 years, where you could not even dream that India will put a human in the space, today we are moved into that direction. So there is a way to do this in this country, and this, mind you, was done under governmental supervision. Yeah. This is not a privately run system. So a governmental system with its own structure and methods of governance, and a requirement for a technology which needs totally new culture of governance and approaches, has been shown in areas like space. And there may be other areas. I don't want to, because I'm not authority, I cannot say that whether it's automobiles, whether information technology and so on. But the fact I want to tell is, there has been instances where such things have been considered. But what is the bottom line for this is, that if the existing system is found wanting, because he cannot translate into an action plan for this kind of a policy. We need to review it and change it. The policy can be bold enough to suggest few things. The implementation has to be necessarily much more bolder to make sure that that policy is implemented. I cannot give you specific solution to this because I can give lectures on that. What could be the management, what could be the strategy. That is, I don't think that this is a short period like this, we can really get into that. But I feel it does need a new method of governance, new methods of management, new methods of financial thing, new methods of dealing with private and public partnership, new methods in which the philanthropy can be assured that they can put money into education, and new methods in which faculty, the institutions can marshal their alumni resources by very innovative methods. So there are many things which need to be done. If you look at the number of universities which really trap the alumni resources, you know where it is. If you look at the question of level of autonomy and many other kinds of things on which we are now suggesting, whether it's not only administrative autonomy, financial autonomy, academic autonomy, there are things which is to be done in this country. These are not something which is impossible for this country to do. But what is important is that there is an underlying determination that next 20 years, can I transform this, notwithstanding whose heads will roll, which departments will roll, which kind of systems have to be dismantled, which kind of systems have to be created. So same good people today who are worried about their thing find a much better position. That we fail to understand that aspect of it. And so this is a promise for a better future, not only for the youngsters, but also for administrators and policymakers, because they will probably have a more powerful role to play than what they think today is the best role they are playing. There's a limited vision of the existing people, which we need to get them out of that mindset. That's all I want to say.
Okay. So I think Professor Kasturi Rangan makes a big point about new. And about we need new ways of doing things and potentially doing new things. But the new may involve dismantling some of the things that are in place today. So I just wanted some thoughts from each of you on what new, how new, and in the doing of the new, is it necessary to dismantle what may be in place? So should we start with A for Aditya?
Hello. I definitely think so. At various levels. If you just see, I mean, from an ecosystem point of view, so many things have changed. I'm deciding to pull my daughter out of school. I mean, that's like the biggest example, because I just find that even the best school in the city is neither offering her values that are going to be useful 20 years from now, nor a livelihood that's valuable in 20 years from now. So I don't think children are dropping out anymore. I think they are walking out. Even when you speak to 8th grade kids and parents, I think the parents are really smart. They're recognizing that the current system of teaching you H2SO4 plus NaCl is equal to 3 NaCl, whatever that thing was, is just not valuable. And instead sending their children off to internships to go with the mama and go and do some jari work, or sending them off with another chacha to go and do some work in a factory. And that is how children are actually learning. It's not that they're not learning. And in that, they're picking up certain skills. You know, Abhijit already spoke about mental maths being better than this thing math, than regular maths. So I think if schools really don't substantially reinvent post-primary, I think up to grade 5 is sort of okay, basically because you need to know language and maths. But from grade 6 to 12, if you don't substantially reinvent, I don't think it's going to work. I think you're going to lose the upper middle class. You're going to, and you have to also look at the fact that it's an AI world. So a lot of jobs are going to need completely different skills from what they need today. You need much more creativity and collaboration. So yeah, I mean, starting off, I just want to throw that salvo that I think grade 6 to 12 needs substantially overhaul. Grade 1 to 5 needs efficiency. I mean, as in I agree with the goals, but you need to do it properly. Grade 6 to 12 needs just new goals.
Shaheen?
Thanks for the question, beautiful question. I think for me, the big shift and the new, I've been working with kids for about 30 years, and for most of those years, I really thought that I was working for children and for education. And the real shift has come a few years ago when I've realized that actually, unless we work with children, we're not going to get to the end game. And it's interesting to me that unlike in most other businesses where it comes very naturally to us to be asking our customers, why do you want a product and what kind of product do you want and how do you want it delivered? In education, we don't do that. We go to conference after conference and we listen to experts and adults, and we're not asking our children, why do you want to learn and what do you want to learn and how do you want to learn? And I think the new will come from that shift in saying that at every level of the system, can we see our students as partners in this work? So I go from a classroom being me as one teacher and 30 kids to us as 31 learners learning from each other. And at the school level, I have kids involved at governance. And at the NGO level, I have students sitting on my board. And I think that's where the world will change. And today, with radical examples that are so compelling, like a Greta Thunberg, my question is like, what is the education system doing and what can each one of us do to have every single child not leave school, but today be excited and equipped to really change the world?
Aditya?
Can I just say one word for this? So, Shaheen, we found a nice way to frame this. So we said the world went from teacher-led education to child-centered education in the last 25 years. And we are saying the next 25 years is from child-centered to child-led. And that's what's exciting, that the child leads, because the questions my daughter asked me, I don't know the answers for. I met a colleague yesterday who just told me that, his son, who's 11 years old, watched Pay It Forward, which is a movie in which there are three, you do something good for 3 people, and the response is that they have to do it for 3 more people. The question the child asked after the movie was, why does this not exist in the real world? A teacher is just not equipped to answer that question. I mean, he doesn't want to know the theory. He says, why didn't you start something like this? Why do you choose not to do this in your daily life? None of those questions as an adult are prepared to answer. And so then we are forcing the current societal structures and the current answers onto that child, saying, no, you got to be realistic. Is that what you want the adult to tell the child? I mean, so I think the child-led, and so that really requires a lot of reimagination of the teacher and the parent and the society and the media in that context.
Sridhar, some contributing thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I think about, and it kind of both humbles me and frustrates me a bit, is that, if I pick up documents that we have written, say, 10 or 15 years back, saying that, this is the kind of thing that needs to get done in education. We've done these notes, we work with the private schools also, but a lot with the government, so we write about these kind of notes to government. And you pick it up and you read it, and you find, I think most of us do, that a lot of what you've written there is equally valid today. In fact, just now we were talking to somebody saying, we did a study in 2006 and 2011 about the quality of education, and can we repeat it now and see where we are? And frankly, my fear is that we are going to see a slight dip. So one of the things that troubles me is that all of us have been, I lived in the US for the last 4 years, and I came back and I felt that the amount of dedication, the quality of people, the kind of efforts that we are trying to do to make a difference in education, I think is substantial. I don't see this is not the way that change is happening, for example, from what I've seen in the Western world. But in spite of that effort, is the result that we are seeing commensurate with that? And I think the answer is no. So some point, I feel I have to ask myself, am I going to feel satisfied that I did this for 25 years or that it created this actual impact? So that is one thing. And one conclusion that I have on this is that, good people have to get into positions where they can influence some of these decisions. So even the way that we do education is one where we kind of are encouraging and training children in ways that they are not just recipients of education, but in a position to take these decisions and change the system. I still haven't seen that kind of success that we need. The second thing here is that, if we look at, So for example, one of the things we were looking at is, rote learning has always been an area of concern for us. It's like very, very deeply embedded in what we do. You kind of say, this is the textbook and you're studying this. Now, we've been looking at what is happening on this around the world, and one of our fears today is that South Asia, India and South Asia as a whole, are actually falling behind, and we have some of the most rote systems, more than what's happening in, say, parts of Africa and so on, which were considered or are considered backward. So I know these are depressing things to talk about, but it's also telling us that we need this kind of change desperately. I think technology, actually using it in a way that it makes a difference to children's learning. One of the things I think that is good in the new education policy is the talk about foundational learning, because again, it's sad that I think Pratham is one organization that's been crying their heads out saying that, reading, every kid has to read. A few others also do it, but it's not yet become national policy. So I think there is a mix of the old and the new, but it's certainly it's a dire situation. I think it's something that we don't like to say these things in India that, this is really bad or that India is heading towards a failing state. But I think that if we don't do some of these things, we are there. It's sad, but I think we have to do something about it.
Thanks, and I think it's great to be here and having this conversation. The point I agree with both what Aditya and Shaheen have said, but I think the concern that I have is that our education is still not addressing the issues of equality, justice. And what are the values? Even if we ask children to be partners with us, what is the larger framework that we are going to create? And how do we bring conversations around equality? Like what Greta is doing is asking a question which is much broader. How do we bring these conversations in our classrooms? And how do we talk about the kind of things that they are seeing around? And for our concern is that if we look at what's happening in society around gender inequality, it's happening, reinforcing at every institution that a child is confronted with, so whether it's the family, whether it's a school, whether it's a community. And then when we talk about why is it that a certain person can behave in this way, why a certain kind of violence is justified, but we are not asking that question in the school. We are not asking the question that why are we accepting the division in our society so easily and not being able to challenge. So I feel somewhere that while we are talking about the future of work changing so radically, how are we going to talk about future of human relationship and redefining them? Because they are also changing, and we need to bring those conversations of justice, inequality, privilege, agency together in our school system, along with what else we are learning in relation to the maths and the science. So how do build the bridge between these two, I think is a important area that we really need to bring in.
I mean, across all four of you, I think you're agreeing on some things, that what education does has to be re-questioned. Certainly, I think the how, because the way in which the relationships between people who are involved in the system are today structured are perhaps not the best way in which to move forward. But at the same time, what Sridhar, I think you're saying, is there are some old problems that still need to be tackled. And whether it is a question of efficiency or it's a question of doing it in a different way is not clear. But I'd like you to try and imagine a little bit more concretely for us. Aditya, you said that you think the primary is kind of okay because there are some basic skills that are needed. Sridhar referred to the fact that foundational learning, without which we can't move ahead, but that a really big change needs to come about in the post-primary stage. Shaheen did not really specify the stage, but it would be good to kind of give a concrete example of what this reimagination could look like. For example, if children are asked, what do you want to study and how do you want to study, how fundamentally different will it be from what we are trying to do today? So some concrete thoughts about reimagining. Anyone? And plus, it's just not me asking questions. Feel free to ask each other. And we have 500 people in this room as well.
Yeah, so we are still visualizing this. We're trying a whole bunch of experiments, but they're really exciting. They're nowhere even close to something that can be published or RCT'd or whatever, but at least the initial signs are really exciting. Our thesis was, how do children become change? Question is, can children in grade 5 to 8, we've had a lot of innovation in science education, right? And that was required for the last 25, 30 years. And in science, you study a concept and you have a lab. And you go and do something in a lab and you see whether it works. And this is very important because you manipulate the material universe by understanding science. On the other hand, in the social sciences, there is no lab. You learn history in abstractions, you learn civics in abstractions, you learn geography in abstractions. Now, if you wanted to learn to manipulate the social universe in the same way that you manipulate the material universe, right? Which is, what is the social universe? That is the ecology, right? I know the water is drying up in the pond near my village, but I'm not taught how to do anything about that. I come back into my classroom and learn some water cycle. There's no water for the past 20 years. There's been no water cycle in my village. So what am I learning, right? There's no lab in which to do this. Similarly, I learn civics and rights, and I'll go back to my village and I see that my mother has no rights when my father beats her, right? And so there's just a complete mismatch between the two sides. Similarly, I learn something about history, and my tribe is not even mentioned in the textbook. It doesn't even exist in the textbook. So do I have no history? Does only the country have history? My region has no history? What is it? So you have no clue. The social sciences don't have a lab. And so what we're trying to do is saying the social science lab is actually out there. It's in the fact that your mother is getting beaten. Is there something that can be done? Let's now learn about the police. Let's learn about the rights. Let's learn about the law at that point. Okay, the pond nearby has gone for a toss, and it's not this thing. Let's now learn who's responsible for that pond, who in government is responsible, what is the panchayat's role, what is the community's role, how does water get conserved, and let's go out and do that. So when you put children into small groups of 4, 5, and say which of these problems affects you the most, right? And they pick up these problems, and they form groups, and then you support them as teachers to do the problem solving on such systemic issues. And they're actually learning collaboration, they're actually learning research, they're actually changing their societies, and most importantly, like you said, Nandita, they're learning agency. Because today you can finish history, civics, geography, and you can get 100 on 100, and still feel that you can't do anything about your mother getting beaten, which makes really no sense. Right? That's not what science teaches you. Science teaches you to experiment after that. The social sciences really need to teach us to experiment after that and actually change the world. And the difference between the science, what we're realizing is the difference between the science education and the social science education. Science teaches you, I don't know enough about science, so Sridhar, correct me, but it teaches you cause and effect. Social science is causes and effects. So it's extremely complex. It's systems thinking. It's not analytical reasoning, right? And so therefore, the causes and effects are very difficult to teach. You need a near liberal arts education to figure out for that child why my community is organized in a way in which gender has been constantly oppressed. It's a combination of history, philosophy, domination, political science, a whole bunch of things. And until you understand that, there's no use. So I think projects where they cause change, 3-month projects, and you do 12 projects like that over the year, and we found 120 projects that children have done. Small things that they've done in their society. There was a Shamshan Ghat near the school, because of which people thought there was bhoot in the school and didn't used to go. Can anything be done about that? Now, moving a Shamshan Ghat in a village is a very complicated exercise, but kids got it moved, right? They got the adults together, they spoke in front of the panchayat, and they convinced the panchayat that this can be moved, right? And suddenly adults are listening to kids saying, yeah, I didn't realize that you're getting fearful. So that's where you're listening to the kid, but you're causing social change. That's your mini Greta Thunberg right there. So I think one of the big things is, can we actually reinvent social science education to actually be about projects that kids do, which teaches them collaboration, all your 21st century skills in that research, critical reasoning, systems thinking, but actually cause change. So I don't think we can run this effort with adults needing to teach children. I think children will lead the revolution.
I'll just build on that with examples, because I think this is what makes me more excited than anything else. I think an example that sparked this for me several years ago was actually a visit in New Zealand to a high school where the entire year's syllabus was that the children, 10th standard, were building a house at scale which they were going to donate at the end of the year to a homeless family. And I thought about the kinds of skills that they were learning through that project, the academic skills, the values, what is the evaluation at the end of the day? You're not successful if you're a 96 versus a 95. You're successful if you've built a house that when it rains, the roof is able to keep the rain out and the family is actually happy and can live in a home. So I think we can do a lot to bring the idea of social change and actual skills together. More close to home, we have a 12-year-old in Ahmedabad, one of our students who lives literally in the middle of Ahmedabad's dumping ground. So there are 8 mountains of garbage and his home is there in the middle. And this 12-year-old has set up 21 community centers. Each community center is run by a 10-year-old teacher who teaches students foundational learning. He's also scaled the mountain of garbage and collected the toxic substances, sent them to the media, got articles published, and lobbied with the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation to actually start removing the garbage dump. And he's 12 years old. And when I think about what has actually led to that, what's the structure underpinning it, I think one is the question on, are we creating simple spaces in our classrooms and schools for kids to be themselves? That no matter who I am, whether I'm transgender or dark-skinned or a girl, can I be myself without judgment, and can I raise my voice without judgment? And I found that all of us in education, we talk a lot about how to get kids to learn, but to get kids even to a place where they are ready to learn requires a lot of thought. So that idea of safety. And then I think, as Aditya said, getting them just excited about solving something, anything that they want to solve, and helping tie it back to concrete academic skills, values, and mindsets that they actually need. And the third thing we found is the power of example. Them being able to share that story, because my story will inspire your story, and then suddenly it becomes the norm and not the exception, that every single one of us, and we don't need to wait 15 years till we graduate to bring about change, we can bring about change today. And we've seen these projects work with kids as young as 6 and 7 years old.
Nandita?
No, I feel I agree that we really need to restructure and find a way to bring these discussion and dialogue, and also what Abhijit ji said, how do we listen to each other? Because a lot of time it's who's talking and then who's listening, and are we challenging the power dynamics within that also? So that also is an issue, but I feel sometimes that we need to also question the framework in which some of these things, like for example, I studied social work, and we're constantly doing labs. We are always doing field work, and it is a definitely good learning that we got, but is it an adequate learning for us to be able to question a lot of things? So I think that whole idea of just social science having lab, how do we do it in a larger framework of even the way education itself is part of the larger reinforcing of the current status quo? So how do we challenge? Is there a way to challenge that? Is there a way to question some of these issues also? And I think that kind of critical thinking, is that possible for us to develop within education system? So I think, and like what you say, it's true that experiential learning, like for our girls, when we are working with young women, we are not doing primary education, but little older girls, like 16 and all. It is their own personal experience of changing their own lives, questioning what's happening to their mothers, to their grandmothers, that has also given them the confidence to do things in their own life differently. And I think that kind of reflective thinking as to what I can do for my mother, but also what can I do differently in my life. And I think it's not only about talking to girls, it's also about talking to boys. And what are boys understanding about what their role on society is, how do they look at issue of masculinity, and asserting that masculinity to make sense for themselves as to who they are. how do we challenge that? Because that is also making them think in a particular way that I have to be this way for me to be a cool guy, to be a person who is valued in that particular ecosystem of peers. How are we going to challenge some of those things is what I feel is important.
Sridhar, I wanted to add to what is already being said, that while I feel that over the last 10, 15 years, there's been many things that have been tried in a classroom setting or in terms of whatever the teaching learning interactions go. But in the end, perhaps one of the things that is completely unchanged in the Indian education system is what happens to you in 10th standard, when you have to sit for an exam, which then decides what your future will hold. Now, coming from a large experience that Sridhar you have, without the system being aligned in its changes, it's very difficult for any one piece to move ahead. So if you looked at it from that examination and assessment point of view, and think about all the changes we'd like, what would be your recommendations in terms of trying to move the ball on this?
Thanks. Yeah. You know, in fact, if you look at, so I want to also talk about foundational learning, but this really fits in perfectly. If you look at the education system that we have, and I still think it's like, it's like super critical for us that, you know, all children are able to read, write, and do, you know, basic arithmetic by grade 5. I mean, this is, I still think that this is, like somebody said this once, that, you know, that is the fundamental human rights you need for a child, because if you're not able to achieve that, you're kind of shutting him out of everything else that he can achieve. But basically in the education system, this is one base, and the output, the outcome that is expected, which is the exam system, is the other point. If we are able to control these 2 points, you can actually bring about change in the system as a whole. In fact, you don't have to make too many other interventions in the system within that. There is an outcome here which basically says, don't think, just answer this way, you know, coaching is the way to go, and so on. You know, this, like, you know, what we call science is not really science, right? It's a collection of facts that children are expected to learn.
Mike.
I think I should just change the mic. Yeah. So, yeah, this is better. So these are the 2 endpoints, and the beauty of it is that these 2 endpoints are much easier to control than to dramatically change the system for all the ills that we see in the system. So, and both these cases are quite simple. I mean, in the case of the former one, you're talking of a national priority that every child can read by grade 3 and do arithmetic operations by grade 5. You know, this simple thing is going to enable children to use the internet, to use the resources, to read, and so on. In fact, I say that if you do this, they can survive a bad middle school education. But the end point is equally important. You know, again, what is the end point? The end point is you need tests that check for understanding. This is not rocket science. I mean, you have international tests like PISA. We do tests. There are tests available in the country, which kind of check that are children understanding what they're supposed to do. So I find that these 2 pieces, we talk about something called the science of learning, which is nothing but analyzing why do these things happen. So for example, reading, there are a number of pre-reading skills. If children get them by grade 1, they tend to be able to read well by grade 3. If they don't get them by grade 1, you can still fix the problem in a few weeks. But if a child is not reading in grade 3, it's much more difficult to fix the problem. So I think working on these 2 endpoints is actually something that, you know, we as a country and as a state, we can actually do if we make it a national priority. And I hope that that happens and we can move towards that.
I have just going down a different path. I look at maybe the work that a lot of people are doing, but in particular, Aditya and Shaheen, you've been leaders and pioneers in that, bringing young people from different fields into education. And it looks like from the beginning days of having this kind of fellowships, that this idea of fellowships, both in education and in generally more widely in the social sector, seems to have really expanded. What do you make of this trend? And you work very closely with a lot of young people in this way. Are these also an important part of what you think will lead to later changes? Or is this just a passing phase in which people pass through this and just go back to, you know, pretty standard lives beyond?
Great question. So actually 12 years ago, 2008, we started the first sort of Indian fellowship inspired by Teach for America. We said, let's do our own Desi Tadka version, right? And I don't believe we were the first one to start the fellowship. I believe Pratham was the first one to start the fellowship with the Bal Sakhi. So let's be clear, that was the first fellowship in the country where young women believed that they could cause change. I think we just sexed it up a little bit, that's all. I want to relate this to the previous question, Rukmini, right? Why is this fellowship happening? In fact, now we are saying, what's the next 10 years of fellowship? At that time, we were innovative. Now there are like 70 different fellowships. And at that time, when we went to colleges and said fellowship, they said, what does that mean? Now it seems to be a pretty popular thing to do. So we said, what's the next 10 years of stuff that we want to do now? You know, this is reaching its sunset. And the reason people are picking up the fellowship is because their college education was useless. They're not picking it up because they want the fellowship. It's because it didn't help them, give them a safe space to discover, to experiment with themselves, to understand real issues, and focus them on other abstract issues. Fellow after fellow, if you listen to why did you join the fellowship, it has very little to do with social work. It has very little to do with helping someone else. I wanted to discover myself. I don't want to sit in a company and go in one direction. I want to just discover, experiment, sample, try, experiment, learn about myself. And the main thing that we achieve at the end of the 2 years, because now we've sort of reasonably processed it, it's a 2-year process of self-discovery, is typically by about 18 months, somewhere between 18 and 30 months, they found one thing that they are excited about doing for the next 10 to 20 years of their lives, right? We call it a private dream discovery. So you could be extremely successful, and college is training you for success, but for a lot of these kids, meaning is also important, right? And money has meaning, but not beyond a point. So I think that's what it's helping them discover. It's helping them discover meaning. It's helping them sort of find a trajectory to life. And then, you know, just yesterday I met a bunch of 12 fellows who've sort of passed out 5 to 12 years ago. Someone is, you know, works with the Chief Minister of Haryana. Someone's working with the Chief Secretary of Bihar. And when you ask her why is she doing it, she still relates back to the fellowship. She said, I knew that finally I explored and I realized that Bihar is what I care about. Women is what I care about, and today women are in agriculture, so therefore today I care about women in agriculture, right? So she's got a method of thinking about how to make life meaningful, which college and university just didn't give her, which I think is exciting. So I don't know, so I don't think it's going to go away unless we substantially change college. And that's when we realize that, okay, you don't just have to change college, you have to change high school education. This whole thing is so complicated. One of the kids who was working with me, a young fellow, he had a choice of either paying $40,000 to do a data analytics course in some university he got in the US, which is supposedly the top 3, or learning it by himself and continuing to do the odd jobs that he was doing. And he chose the latter. He said, I don't need that degree. I don't need that stamp of approval. I'd rather do more internships. So I think it's the same thing. Young people are just much more confident. They have many more resources. And they need to know what is the purpose of living life. You know, they need to find meaning, and that's where this provides help.
Can I just add? No, I think also they're much more willing to do experiential learning. You know, like when they come to this point, they're really out to say that I'm not interested. Oh, they're much more interested in figuring out, like what you said, that how am I learning? So even if you look at like tourism now with young people, it's really about experience of tourism, and it's not about going and visiting a place. So even other things are changing because their way of learning, their way of expressing their happiness, what is it that they're looking for is changing. And that's why I think that it's not going to be a very short-term thing, that whether it's a fellowship format, whether it is an internship format, or whether they find something short-term for finding meaning for themselves, but it's something that's here to stay. That's my sense, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, where they find experience as a way to express themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the fact that college education is one reason why people are searching, but I also, in my experience, so in 10 years of Teach for India, we've had almost 100,000 people apply to a 2-year full-time fellowship, right? So there's clearly a lot of interest in doing something different. And I think people come in for different reasons. They come in to search for self. They also come in to build the nation. They come in for children. There's so much idealism in young people that I think we just need to tap and build on. And I would say, like, we need to work together to get every bright person possible to work in the development sector for some time or the other, because our problems are so huge. And I found that the energy and passion of young people to work for children in ways that none of the teachers in my kids' high-income schools will be willing to do, absolutely like phenomenal when you see that kind of dedication. So I just think we need to do more and more and create more and more platforms for people. I think today there are more than 200 odd fellowships, which is incredible. Like, young people have so many different platforms to contribute. And to me, the next decade is not just about college students coming in and speaking up, but really what is the role of a child in school as young as 5, 6, 7 in actually looking at how we really uphold the ideals in our preamble and serve the country and learn. I think for me, one of the biggest learnings has been that it's not just about contribution, but the kind of learning and accelerated leadership growth when you are in service of any of the ideals you talked about: justice, equality, liberty, fraternity. I mean, I think what it does for us as individuals in pursuit of service is quite incredible.
I just want to add here that, so I'm not involved in a fellowship and I'm just looking at it from outside, but I think what it really gives young people is exposure to something that they may be vaguely aware about. And it doesn't happen if you do a visit or something, but you are kind of living in something for 2 years, actually experiencing, seeing that form of life, whether it's the education or the life of a very poor person. And that makes a huge difference. And if it's done at the right age, it can change their perspective on life. So I think these are like super powerful. And I would do these without a short-term goal that, okay, if so many did not join the development sector, it's bad or something like that. I think it's a country like India, which is so vast, this kind of exposure is the most important thing that can be given.
So I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I have you all captive, because I'm sure until I say so, you can't leave the stage, to get your advice on something. Now, I can see there are many Pratham people in the audience, and we've been, we've spent 25 years with our tagline, which says every child in school and learning well. Actually, it was originally every child in school and learning, and nobody really knows when the well came. Somebody put the well in. Now, Madhav, who naturally we have to listen to, has been after us to say, drop the school. And we have, not reached a conclusion. So as a closing thought for our next, I'm not asking you for a tagline, although if you were to offer one, we'd be very happy. But as a closing thought, you know what we've done for the last 25 years. You're very, very familiar with the problems that still surround us. What would be your advice to us for maybe not 25, but in the near future, 1 or 2 things that you think we should focus on that we potentially have the ability to focus on?
You stole one of my favorite Pratham stories, which is we had invited Madhav into one of our big education conferences, and a lot of starry-eyed young educators who believed a lot in school. And he came in and he wrote Pratham's vision on the board, and then he canceled a word, and it became every child out of school and learning well. So I've always been wondering where that's going to go with Pratham. But I would say, to me, like, the 2 things that stand out the most and that I've been the most inspired with of Pratham, one is the boldness. I remember years ago a Pratham program where grandmothers in villages were brought in to tell stories to teach kids history. And I remember thinking, like, what a bold and beautiful way to think about history. So courage and boldness is one that I would hold on to. And the second is this real inspiration in terms of what does a movement actually look like? So the ability to mobilize community and movement. And so when I pull that together, I would actually say I would love to see Pratham actually piloting movements of learning that happen beyond school. I think the world is going to fundamentally change, and school may continue to be one institution, but certainly not the only institution that is going to promote learning. So I would love to see movements way beyond school. I would also love to see Pratham sort of jumping on this idea of the role that children today play, not as kids that need to be educated for the future, but what would a mass movement of children involved as partners in the education system actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, I would just agree that, you know, especially with what's happened today and the fact that learning is the key thing. So I also, I don't know how you put it. I don't think just dropping school gives the right sense, but the learning is the important part. The second thing that, you know, this whole point of empowering, I mean, the fact that there is, it's not that, it's like children doing the things, I think you said it in the beginning where we said children-led education. I think if these two are there in the mission, these are the two things that I would see. Of course, there are all the techniques, and I think those are important. Technology, we think that the scientific approach is important. So I think these are the important things, but I would agree that it should not be restricted to the school.
I think what I agree with what Shaheen was saying is that it's a movement of learning in multiple ways besides school. So what could be the other platforms what can be created, which is in a way non-formal learning also, and how can we encourage? And I think that somewhere, at least from our perspective, I really think that how we have been able to institutionalize something like an environment education, why can't we institutionalize equality education within the school curriculum, starting from primary education? Why can't we talk about like it's not about sex education, but it's about understanding human relationship. Why can't we talk about how we relate to each other? And some of these learning processes should also get integrated in all our learning, both in school and outside. And I think that is something like what Shaheen said, a bold move that I think would be great if Pratham could do.
You got me really thinking there. Very nice question. I don't think I have a good enough answer for the time being, but I'd love to engage with you on that. I think instead of just knocking out school, at least the ideas that came to mind were every child in playground and work and learning well. I learned everything in this playing football. I don't even know what I got taught, but there's so much playground, collaboration, teamwork, failure, succeeding after failure, losing your first football competition, competing, so many things in playground and learning well. So every child in playground and learning well, and also a lot of physical development in playground and learning well. School is somehow still perceived as science inside classroom, right? What about physical development and team and all that? So every child in playground and learning well. Every child in community and learning well, right? My daughter, any person is picking up from the panchayat conversation, you're picking up from your joint family, what are the norms and stuff like that. And there's no place to debrief those norms, right? My daughter came back and said, but why is that auntie talking like this? You know, so what does that mean? Where is the space for that conversation? So she is picking up from there. So every child in community and learning well. Then there's every child with media and learning well. Now, what are they picking up from media? What are they doing? So if the school reinvents itself as a place which recognizes that there's more than itself as a learning space and is helping the child process that, saying, what did you learn in the playground? Okay, so you lost, you felt really bad, you felt depressed. What are the choices you have now? Okay, you felt really bad that your aunt is treating your uncle like this and your cousin is bullying the other cousin. What do you want to do about it, right? Or, you know, you're feeling it. So wherever you are, I mean, it doesn't matter which of these spaces it is, but I think the school has only a hope if we reinvent. And I think that's a wording issue now. If you completely kill the word school, I think it'll be considered too revolutionary. But if you tweak it too little, it won't be worth it. And I think this requires some level of brilliance between you and Madhav to think of how to position something like this. I don't think you should look too conservative, because really setting out a bold thing like this would be valuable. Yeah.
So I think we have a lot to think about. 25, or actually more than 25 years ago, Madhav and Farida both came into this from an adult literacy and a campaign and a movement point of view. And our first step in Bombay was really Balwadis, which were also very large scale, but outside the traditional system and involving communities and all kinds of people in a big way. And I think perhaps in all these years, with everything we've done, I think what I'm hearing from you is hang on to some of those threads. Of course, they will operate in a new way because contexts are changing, but that's perhaps what our future holds. So I want to thank you all very much for being with us till now. Thanks to the audience for staying for a full show. It's been a 3 to 6 show from a matinee show. And I now hand over to Devyani, who has been leading us this whole day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today. It was a real pleasure to listen to your thoughts. And just before we close the event, we had to get some Pratham people back on stage, of course. So I'm going to invite the first batch of Pratham. Now I'll let you self-identify because I'm going to say the years. So this is 1994 and 95. Those who joined Pratham in 1994 and 95, could you please come on stage? 1994 and 95. Slowly emerging, slowly from the back. We have many people, I think maybe some people have left, but those of you who joined Pratham in 1994 and 1995, please come on the stage. You want to invite the next batch, or you want me to? First this batch. Yeah. Oh, dhyan se, sorry. Okay, I'll stand here. नहीं वो बंद नहीं हो सकता मैं खड़ी होती हूँ हाँ मैं करती हूँ क्या हुआ I need to move this here so that people don't trip on it. Okay, we should get out of the frame. You sound 94 to 95. Cool, na? We should get out of the frame for a second. This is 1994-95 on stage. Disqualified. We have some gate crashers. Huh? Can't decide which year. Second batch. Second batch is coming. Wait. I'm announcing. Wait. Aren't you in the first batch?
नहीं full time नहीं था volunteer तो था.
Oh, that's
I have
okay.
decided.
Do we have more? 94, 95? Oh. जिन्होंने 94, 95 में ज्वाइन किया 94 या 95 में ज्वाइन किया
95 में हम थे ना
हाँ तो जाओ ना जल्दी वो ले जाए Okay, and now I'm going to invite what we have defined as the second batch, which is 1996, 1997, and 1998. 1996, 1997, and 1998. Please come on the stage. Yeah, they know. Go get her, go get her. 1996, 1997, 1998. Thank you आप लोग को.
First program मैंने किया था, so it's really nice.
Ma'am, where's ma'am? She's there. Madhav, she's inside.
Yeah, okay. I don't have to be there. I'm 94, 95. मेरा हो गया.
Okay, I wanted Usha to say something.
कसं काय 94-95 मध्ये मी नाही होतो
Okay, wait, Usha is coming. What's happening? Getting people on stage is enough hangama in Pratham. Prem, ulta pakda, ulta.
माधव सर नहीं दे रहे वो कह रहे हैं मैं जा रहा हूँ
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much to Tata Institute for giving us this lovely space and to the director for giving us permission to do our event here. Thank you once again for everyone for coming and for watching. It's been a privilege to share this moment with you. And I just want to share that there is high tea served outside. So please have some tea before you leave. And thank you. Thank you for being here.